This is a world where humanity is nothing but cattle, and the predators don't even bother hiding. As a squad of suited enforcers is violently blasted down a dark corridor, a lone executioner steps through the breach to finish the bloody job. The old scriptures preach that the Lord made mankind from soil and bone, but they conveniently left out the mutated bloodsuckers waiting in the dark with razor-sharp fangs, eager to tear that holy flesh apart. This rogue inquisitor isn't here to offer salvation. Carving a whirlwind of righteous slaughter through the undead, his only sermon is a violent barrage of steel and lead. It's ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Bathed in the eerie glow of the night sky, the silver-haired hunter stands victorious over the carnage. Lowering his smoking hand cannon, he stares into the dark to deliver a chilling promise. Welcome to the world of the Mad Moon, Han Sagan. This city is a full-blown supernatural war zone, from psychotic vampires casually draining victims in neon alleys, to muscle-bound freaks craving chaos, to cybernetic mercenaries waiting in the pouring rain with silenced rifles. Death rules these streets. Revving his heavy motorcycle, our green-haired protagonist grips his katana with a cocky smirk. Han Sagan has just rolled into the deadliest turf war on Earth, and surviving this lunar nightmare is going to demand absolute, unforgiving savagery. Under the glow of a full moon, a sleek sports car tears down the coastal highway, slicing through the endless dark. It parks at a desolate dockyard, and out steps the silver-haired hunter. His trench coat blows in the salty wind. Nearby, a couple of low-level thugs huddle around a barrel fire, discussing a new illegal narcotic called psychedelic moon. Their midnight chat is abruptly interrupted by the towering inquisitor. One of the grunts foolishly steps up, demanding to see an invitation. The rogue executioner gladly obliges, pressing his massive hand cannon right between the gangster's eyes. Who needs a printed ticket? Before the punk can even blink, the priest mercilessly pistol whips him into a bloody pulp. Flashing a wicked grin at the trembling survivor, he asks if his gun counts as a VIP pass. Meanwhile, inside a neon-drenched nightclub, the bass is pumping, but the real party is taking a dark turn. A monstrous patron flashes glowing red eyes and jagged fangs. The hunt is on. For these creatures of the night, humans are just walking juice boxes. The terrified DJ freezes as the bloodsucker complains that she's killing the mood. One of his suited goons carelessly tosses an unconscious girl onto the floor like a discarded toy. I definitely wouldn't want to be in that VIP section. Hungry for a better game, the vampire strides onto the dance floor to claim his next prey. Big mistake. A much deadlier apex predator is already heading his way. Inside the club, the lead bloodsucker corners a terrified girl, purring that they have no reason to starve tonight. But his dinner plans are violently cancelled. The heavy reinforced doors explode inward. One of the suited goons is sent rocketing across the dance floor in a brutal shower of gore, sliding to a halt like a discarded trash bag. The pulsing bass cuts out as the remaining undead turn toward the entrance. Stepping through the dust with a massive weapon case is the silver-haired hunter, prompting the stunned vampires to demand who this arrogant crasher is. One impatient freak doesn't wait for an answer, lunging forward with razor-sharp claws. The rogue priest just sighs at the lack of hospitality. Casually strolling into the neon lights, he mocks the monsters for dragging their once proud faction into the gutter. He wonders aloud if their dead master would weep at this pathetic display. Honestly, I'd be crying too if I had to fight this guy. The brutal provocation hits its mark. The red-haired boss finally realizes who he's facing. Sylvester, the legendary Vatican executioner expelled for his extreme methods. But instead of running for their lives, the furious undead bare their fangs and swarm forward, promising to paint the night with his blood. The rogue executioner calmly notes their terrible hospitality right before vanishing into a lethal blur. He tears through the frenzied swarm like a silver hurricane, his blade carving through the suited bloodsuckers before they can even blink. Did they seriously think numbers mattered against an apex predator? Mocking their unholy origins, the Inquisitor recites a dark, bloody baptism. He dances through the shower of severed limbs and geysers of gore, delivering his final sermon to the flying corpses. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Only the red-haired club owner remains standing amidst the slaughter. The desperate boss snarls that he doesn't need any information from a dead man. Unfazed, Sylvester just smirks, calling him the most pathetic mongrel of them all. That icy insult shatters the monster's pride, sending him hurtling forward in a blind rage. Sparks fly across the neon dance floor as the silver-haired hunter effortlessly parries a blinding barrage of strikes. Realizing standard attacks are totally useless, the cornered vampire forces his own anatomy to mutate, elongating his arm into a massive, jagged meat hook. Sylvester isn't remotely fazed by the grotesque transformation. As the beast leaps high for a devastating overhead slam, the priest decides he is completely done playing with his food. He casually raises his massive hand cannon to intercept the dive. A deafening blast blows the monster's defense wide open. Without missing a beat, the hunter steps in and delivers a brutal, gut-spilling sword slash. The red-haired boss coughs up blood, completely outclassed. Before he can even process the fatal wound, the rogue priest kicks him hard enough to shatter the sound barrier, sending the monster crashing through a reinforced wall and into a crumpled heap of rubble. A new voice interrupts the slaughter, complaining that butchering them so thoroughly ruins the blood harvest. Stepping over the dismembered corpses is Jung Jun, a local vampire hunter filling in for their usual cleaner. The mercenary kneels beside a bleeding thug, noting that this flashy nightclub makes a perfect breeding ground for their undead faction to farm humans. He barks at the Inquisitor to stop slacking and finish the job. Good advice, because the club owner isn't dead yet. His crimson eye flares with desperate survival instincts. Sensing the sudden spike in demonic energy, the silver-haired hunter just smirks. The cornered beast violently launches himself toward the ceiling to escape. But you never turn your back on an apex predator. Sylvester calmly raises his hand cannon and unloads a rapid-fire barrage. The holy rounds rip into the fleeing monster, detonating like miniature suns mid-air. The brutal impact blasts the bloodsucker completely out of the building, sending him crashing into the desolate dockyard. Stripped of his pride and bleeding out, the once arrogant lord is reduced to scrambling away on all fours into the dark. Watching the wounded beast scamper into the darkness, Jung Jun lazily suggests letting the monster just bleed out. The silver-haired executioner is not amused by half measures. He turns a chilling glare on the scarred mercenary, promising to put a bullet in his head if he ever suggests slacking off again. Realizing the deadly priest is entirely serious, the cleaner quickly drops his casual attitude. Flashing a nervous thumbs up, he promises to scrub the dockyard spotless and scrambles off to work. Honestly, I'd run too if I angered a guy wielding a portable anti-aircraft gun. Left alone under the glowing moon, Sylvester curses this sudden complication. That fleeing boss wasn't just scared. His mind shattered, triggering a feral mutation. A rabid, starving vampire is now loose in the city, and the civilian body count is about to explode. Across town, a massive biker gang tears through an illuminated highway tunnel. A pursuing police cruiser blares its sirens, warning the reckless punks to slow down before they get themselves killed. Instead of stopping, the laughing delinquents just flip off the cops. They think they own the streets. But they have no idea what's waiting in the dark. Weaving aggressively through the chaotic pack is Han Sagan. The green-haired swordsman guns his engine, eyes locked in cold determination behind his visor. He knows the bloody truth. Tonight, the moonlit night demands a sacrifice, and he is riding straight to the warzone. See, Han Sagan's past used to be dangerously boring. A business owner dad, a housewife mom, an overachieving brother, and even a golden retriever named Jeanne d'Arc. It was the perfect picturesque family. Too bad that pristine life was a suffocating cage the green-haired protagonist desperately needed to shatter. With zero interest in academics, he traded suburban peace for the adrenaline of a reckless biker gang. He craved an escape, except the streets are about to offer him a nightmare. The pack tears through the neon-lit asphalt, but a blonde delinquent screams over the roaring engines. Someone is tailing them. Her scarred mercenary boyfriend, Jung Jun, is struggling to shake the pursuer. I already flipped him off and cursed at him, she shrieks, panicking like a rat in a flooded maze. Sagan isn't about to let someone else's mistake become his funeral. Gripping his clutch, the thrill-seeker scoffs. That's because you keep sticking to the main roads. While the rest of the gang acts like a buffet line for predators, he's ready to dictate his own survival. He violently yanks his handlebars, peeling away from the formation. Jung Jun and his girl look back in stunned disbelief, screaming to ask where the hell he's going. Sagan doesn't even flinch. Popping a massive wheelie, he launches his dirt bike straight over the guardrail, plunging into the dark. The gang can only gasp as he plummets. Sagan nosedives down a sheer concrete embankment, completely disregarding gravity. Sparks explode like a dying star as he slides his back tire down the steep wall, expertly wrestling the heavy machine to a flawless landing on the lower streets. If you wanted an unordinary life, kid, you've definitely found it. Leaving the panicked bikers screaming in his dust, Sagan snaps his visor shut and accelerates into the night. He completely tunes out their frantic shouting. Honestly, I'd leave those noisy amateurs behind too. Let them serve as bait while he forges his own path. Tearing down the empty asphalt, the young thrill-seeker pushes his engine to its absolute limit. This reckless speed is his only true act of rebellion. It's the only way out. For a few brief hours, he completely escapes the suffocating cage of his flawlessly boring suburban life. Hours later, the adrenaline fades as he pulls up to his family's upscale mansion. Sagan brushes off his jacket and strolls toward the front door, expecting the usual chaotic welcome. That suburban peace is officially dead. Jeanne d'Arc, their endlessly energetic golden retriever, hasn't barked once. Is she already asleep? The moment he pushes the front door open, a foul stench suffocates him. It smells exactly like rotting meat and copper. Stepping into the pitch-black foyer, he mutters a confused, "I'm home." Suddenly, his sneaker splashes into a thick puddle. He stares down at the crimson liquid. Blood? His veins turn to ice. Trembling in the gloom, he fumbles blindly for the wall switch. The sudden blinding glare of the hallway lights reveals an absolute massacre. A mangled, unidentifiable corpse lies violently sprawled across the once pristine hardwood floor. Someone has turned his safe haven into a slaughterhouse. Refusing to freeze, the teenager violently grips a sturdy umbrella handle like a sword. He creeps deeper into the darkened hallway, his voice cracking with dread. "Mom, Dad, Hyung!" He begs for anyone to answer. Instead, a towering, monstrous shadow rises silently behind his back. The towering shadow doesn't give him a single second to process the slaughter. A massive, mutated hound suddenly tackles Segan from the darkness, its foaming jaws snapping violently around the boy's makeshift weapon as debris scatters across the foyer. Hurled backward onto the slick blood-soaked floor, the young thrill-seeker refuses to just lay down and die. He quickly strips the casing off his umbrella, unsheathing a sturdy wooden training katana, and drops into a desperate defensive stance. As the hulking, red-eyed monster snarls in the dim light, Sagan's heart skips a beat. He recognizes that matted fur. The rabid creature leaps for his throat, forcing the desperate teen to violently slash his own corrupted pet directly across the snout. The horrifying realization utterly crushes him. His sweet, energetic golden retriever, Jeanne d'Arc, was twisted into this feral monstrosity. Yet, examining the totally mangled remains of his parents down the hall, he knows his loyal pet couldn't have caused this sheer level of carnage. Sagan collapses to his knees, violently hurling as unbearable grief and the stench of copper tear his throat apart. His suffocating, flawlessly boring suburban cage wasn't just shattered tonight, it was butchered into pieces. Grief won't save him from whatever real predator is still lurking upstairs. Wiping his blood-stained face, the lone survivor forces himself back up. His blunt wooden blade is completely outclassed here. He needs heavy firepower, sprinting toward the second-floor study to retrieve his father's shotgun. He violently kicks the door open, praying his overachieving older brother managed to secure the weapon. The reality is far worse. The shotgun lies completely untouched on the hardwood, resting right beside his sibling's gutted, lifeless corpse. Cradling his brother's lifeless body against the study's bookshelves, Sagan is crushed by the weight of his own rebellion. Bitter tears stream down his face. If only he hadn't selfishly abandoned his family for a joyride, he could have been here to fight. That crushing guilt rapidly hardens into unforgiving, murderous rage. Shoving a fresh pair of shells into the breach, the lone survivor rises from the blood-soaked floor. His eyes are entirely hollowed out by grief. Whoever butchered his bloodline is going to pay with their life. Gripping the heavy steel barrel, the teenager notices the metal is still warm. His sibling definitely fired this weapon before dying, so why didn't the intruder take it? I'd call leaving a loaded firearm next to a victim a massive tactical error. Did the killer actually want him armed? Stalking up the darkened staircase, Sagan assumes he's hunting an arrogant human intruder. That rational assumption is a fatal mistake. An icy chill spikes down his spine. He freezes as a massive, mutated foot steps heavily out from the shadows above. The grieving teen furiously levels his shotgun. Too bad the weapon suddenly feels completely useless. A horrifying clawed hand rips into the doorframe. Towering at the top of the stairs is a feral, red-eyed nightmare. This isn't a simple home invasion. He's locked inside a cage with an apex predator. Sometimes trauma hits so hard the conscious mind simply shuts down. It's that sudden hollow void experienced when meeting a famous idol or suffering through a terrible joke. The brain short-circuits to protect itself from overwhelming input. Except for Han Se-gun, this total mental blackout isn't born from staring at a breathtaking sunset. It's absolute, paralyzing terror locking him in place. Trapped in the suffocating gloom of his own home, the lone survivor stares up the staircase at a towering, feral nightmare. Blood already streaks down his pale face, yet the sheer panic forces a primal survival instinct to surface. Staring into the glowing crimson eyes of a mutant vampire, Sagan braces his deceased brother's heavy shotgun against his side. With nowhere left to run, he levels the steel barrel right at the monster's chest. The deafening roar of a point-blank blast shatters the heavy silence, illuminating the stairwell in a blinding flash. You'd really think a heavy slug would put a dent in anything, not this hulking freak. The beast completely ignores the smoking steel, lunging down the steps with terrifying, predatory speed. Before the panicked teen can even pump another round, the creature violently swats the weapon away, launching him backward like discarded trash. Sagan crashes violently into the wooden floorboards, his only line of defense clattering uselessly out of reach. Searing, white-hot agony rips through his upper body as he realizes his shoulder has been completely dislocated. Clutching his ruined arm, the green-haired protagonist desperately scrambles backward across the blood-stained floor. What was he thinking trying to fight a monster by himself? He could have just turned and run. He could have immediately dialed the cops and let the professionals handle this nightmare. Instead, he made the fatal mistake of playing the hero. Now he's trapped in a locked house with a very hungry predator. Sprawled helplessly across the freezing floorboards, the crushing gravity of his suicidal choices finally takes hold. The green-haired teen He could have just barricaded the door and begged the emergency operators for salvation. Why didn't he just run? Because in that split second of blinding grief, every logical survival instinct completely evaporated. His only coherent thought was a desperate need to drag the murderous bastard straight to hell. That hollow desire just cost him his life. Now utterly disarmed and physically broken, the battered youth is paralyzed by raw, suffocating panic. The feral nightmare slowly steps over his discarded weapon, completely dominating the narrow hallway and easily blocking any last-ditch attempt at a miraculous escape. With terrifying predatory speed, vicious, razor-sharp claws clamp directly over his bleeding face. The sheer unnatural physical strength of the mutant hoists the helpless boy high into the air like a discarded toy, leaving his legs kicking uselessly. Hot crimson mixes with the bitter, defeated tears streaming down his cheeks as total, utter failure washes over his fractured psyche. He couldn't even manage to inflict a single scratch on the hulking beast. He failed them all. Whispering a choked, heartbroken apology to his slaughtered parents, his brave older brother, and their loyal dog Jeanne d'Arc, the ruined protagonist simply squeezes his eyes shut. Hanging from the creature's grip, he weakly braces himself for the inevitable bone-crushing bite. But the Grim Reaper receives a sudden cancellation notice. Out of absolutely nowhere, a blinding arc of glowing orange energy erupts through the gloom. It cleanly severs the mutant's grotesque skull before it can even flex its jaw. A massive geyser of pitch-black blood fountains high into the air, completely showering the stunned teenager. As the decapitated corpse twitches and heavily collapses at his bare feet, Sagan realizes his brutal nightmare might just be ending. I'd say that's a flawless rescue. Footsteps crunch over shattered glass as the mysterious savior steps fully into the blood-soaked hallway. "So you went and did it after all," a deep voice echoes. But he isn't taking any chances with a freshly decapitated corpse. The newcomer casually raises a massive hand cannon, squeezing the trigger repeatedly to unload a deafening barrage of lead straight into the twitching mutant's chest. Sagan can only lie there, weeping in agonizing, hollow relief as the executioner finishes the brutal job. A blinding cross-shaped sword strike effortlessly carves the towering freak into ribbons. As the dust settles, the silver-haired hunter glares down at the broken teen with absolute icy disdain. "If you're going to die, you should have just done it quietly," the rogue inquisitor scoffs. The monster's severed chunks instantly dissolve into ethereal blue flames, leaving behind nothing but scorched shadows. But this rescue comes with a deadly catch. Instead of offering a medic, the cold-blooded rescuer steps over the ashes and levels his gleaming steel blade right at the battered survivor's throat. He calmly recites ancient scripture, declaring every man on earth a condemned sinner. Talk about a brutal bedside manner. With the razor-sharp tip pressing into his bruised neck, the green-haired protagonist refuses to beg for his life. The hunter's glowing blue eyes drift away from his prey, locking onto the deceased brother's discarded shotgun lying in the gore. The inquisitor demands to know if that heavy weapon belongs to the bleeding teenager. Sagan just glares up in defiant, exhausted silence. The suffocating tension stretches as the executioner studies the bruised, unbroken will of his captive. He lowers his guard just a fraction, muttering that it would be a damn shame to slaughter a guy with that much raw grit. Just as he debates the boy's execution, a sudden, frantic shout shatters the quiet from outside the ruined patio windows. Looks like the cavalry is finally arriving. The rogue executioner vanishes into the shadows just as flashing sirens flood the ruined living room. Heavily armed police officers frantically breach the blood-soaked hallway, shouting for immediate backup the second they spot the battered teenager sprawled among the wreckage. But medical aid means absolutely nothing to a shattered soul. Staring blankly up at the ceiling, hollow tears carve through the grime on Sagan's face as the crushing reality of his total failure takes hold. He whispers broken, agonizing apologies to his slaughtered parents and fallen brother. Paramedics rush the freezing survivor onto a stretcher, leaving behind a shattered family portrait lying in the gore. It's a sick, twisted irony. The green-haired teen always prayed for an escape from his boring, mundane life. The universe finally granted his wish, but the real nightmare is only just beginning. The media frenzy explodes across the nation. News anchors broadcast the gruesome, terrifying details of a family torn apart by their own mutated hound. But they fixate entirely on the sole survivor, questioning exactly why Hans Sagan was found clutching a freshly fired shotgun amidst the slaughter. The court of public opinion wastes no time tearing his reputation apart. Random classmates and neighbors eagerly gossip about his dead genius brother, painting the green-haired teen as a jealous, violent outcast. Seriously, who needs enemies with neighbors like these? The paparazzi swallow that bait whole. Stepping out into the daylight, the traumatized boy is instantly swarmed by a suffocating, impenetrable wall of flashbulbs. Vultures with microphones press in from every possible angle, demanding to know why he blew his own flesh and blood to pieces. They scrutinize him like a caged freak. A heavy recorder jams aggressively into his chest. "Say something," they bark. This relentless mob triggers a violent mental snap. morphing the blinding camera flashes into the glowing blood-red eyes of the nightmare beast that ruined his life. A twisted, unhinged grimace creeps across Segun's sweating face as crushing survivor's guilt takes hold. The voices in his head scream that he was out joyriding while his parents were shredded to meat. Soon, a massive horde of bloodthirsty mutants completely replaces the reporters in his shattered mind. The waking hallucination is just too much to bear. Shaking like a freezing stray, the haunted survivor finally breaks. He screams out in absolute denial, violently shoving through the barricade of greedy journalists and sprinting frantically down the alley to escape his own head. Segun sprints blindly through the winding alleyways, desperate to put as much distance between himself and the ravenous media as possible. He runs until his lungs burn, trying to outpace a reality he simply cannot comprehend. Tears of absolute frustration stream down his face. The traumatized teen gnashes his teeth, violently rejecting the nightmarish memories clawing at his sanity. He just wants to wake up. Unfortunately, the grisly facts are carved into his very flesh. When the police finally snapped him out of his daze back at the crime scene, the massive mutant corpse was entirely gone. Even crazier, his severed left arm was miraculously reattached, leaving only a blood-stained, perfectly whole hand. It feels like a sick, twisted joke, as if an invisible force is aggressively brainwashing him, commanding the boy to just forget the mangled corpses of his parents, to forget the hellish hound, and most of all, to erase the chilling visage of that silver-haired executioner who saved his life. The green-haired survivor retreats into his dark, empty home, trembling beside the chalk outline of his family's murderer. Who on earth would ever believe a teenager babbling about supernatural beasts and rogue inquisitors? Yet staying locked inside this bloody tomb, surrounded by the horrific echoes of his slaughtered brother, is slowly driving him insane. Trapped in purgatory, Segun heads down to the garage. He pulls his hood low, masking his dead, hollow eyes from a world that has already abandoned him. He doesn't belong inside that slaughterhouse, and he sure doesn't belong out there with the vultures either. With nowhere left to hide, the grieving runaway kicks his dirt bike into gear. The engine roars to life as he tears out onto the desolate highway, racing headlong into the pitch-black night. Reaching the desolate outskirts of the city, the runaway finally kills the engine. Overlooking the sprawling neon-lit skyline, Segun pulls off his helmet, desperate for a moment of quiet to process his shattered reality. But peace isn't exactly on tonight's menu. A sudden presence snaps the traumatized teen to attention. Leaning casually against the guardrail is the very man who haunted his nightmares, the towering rogue inquisitor. The silver-haired hunter steps out of the shadows, his icy gaze locking onto the exhausted survivor like a predator sizing up its prey. Panic instantly overrides exhaustion. Segun lunges forward, jabbing an accusing finger at the executioner's chest, screaming that he was there the night his family was slaughtered. The pale stranger barely blinks at the outburst. "Quiet," he commands, his voice dropping the temperature in the air. "You really love causing trouble." Shrinking back from that suffocating aura, the green-haired boy stammers out the question burning in his mind. He asks if this guy is some kind of exorcist hunting monsters. The tall man smirks, noting the kid is getting dangerously close to the terrifying truth. Still hyperventilating, Segun connects the horrifying dots, asking if their mutated hound actually turned into a vampire. The hunter delivers a bone-chillingly blunt confirmation. That single word validates every impossible nightmarish memory the boy tried to suppress. Seeing the boy's absolute shock, the mysterious executioner decides to skip the gentle interrogation. Staring daggers into the teen's soul, he demands to know if Segun drank the beast's blood. Glancing down at his miraculously healed hand, the boy realizes with mounting dread that the monster's infected gore splashed directly into his open wounds. Are his problems only just beginning? The towering executioner confirms the boy's worst fear. If he swallowed the beast's blood, infection is absolutely possible. Desperate to rationalize the impossible, Segun insists he simply shoved his severed arm back into its socket. The pale hunter just scoffs at his fragile human logic. Trembling under the weight of this hidden world, the traumatized survivor asks if there are more of these monsters lurking in the shadows. The rogue inquisitor coldly dismisses the question. He bluntly orders the teen to forget everything he saw and return to a normal life. That callous command shatters the boy's last shred of restraint. How is he supposed to pretend everything is fine when his family is dead? Driven by blinding grief, the runaway recklessly lunges forward, grabbing the terrifying stranger by the collar. It's a phenomenally stupid move. The hunter's eyes ignite with a piercing, otherworldly blue glow as he stares down into the boy's soul. "Don't whine," the executioner growls, his oppressive aura instantly suffocating the teen's rage. He coldly reminds the kid that misfortune isn't exclusive to him. The brutal reality check fails to silence the grieving runaway. He screams that he watched a mutated nightmare devour his own parents, begging to know how he can possibly live with those memories. He just can't walk away. Hot tears of absolute hatred stream down the boy's face. Baring his teeth like a cornered animal, the grieving survivor swears to hunt down and slaughter every last vampire, even if it costs him his life. Staring up at the pale moon, the towering inquisitor finally sighs, realizing this stubborn kid isn't going anywhere. Inside a sunlit cafe, scarred mercenary Jungjun is casually chatting with the local bartender when the front door chimes. The silver-haired hunter completely kills the relaxed vibe as he strolls in, dragging his traumatized shadow behind him. The waitress instantly lights up. She teases the rogue executioner by calling him Sylvie, a nickname that makes the tall killer's eye twitch. He really hates cute aliases. Jungjun squints, instantly recognizing Han Si-gun as the infamous survivor of the recent massacre. But the cleaner quickly pivots to grim business. He reports that the rogue vampire they've been tracking has already fled Korea. The inquisitor groans, heavily slumping into a nearby wooden chair, another pathetic dead end. The scarred veteran leans closer, eyeing the green-haired protagonist with heavy skepticism. He demands to know why the hunter dragged such a frail kid into the underworld. To him, Segun looks like a stiff breeze could snap his neck. The inquisitor completely ignores the question. He locks his cold gaze onto Segun to drop some brutal reality. Humans aren't naturally built to fight these nocturnal monsters. One split second of carelessness means a feral bloodsucker will effortlessly snap his spine and tear his muscle fibers to shreds. So how do fragile mortals bridge that terrifying power gap? The hunter pinches a glowing neon-tinged capsule between his fingers, introducing the boy to psychedelic moon. It's a highly illegal combat stimulant, brewed straight from raw vampire blood. Swallowing this pill entirely numbs physical pain and forces the human body to exert terrifying superhuman strength. But the ultimate cost is absolute devastation. Chronic use rots the flesh from the inside out. You will die a miserable, lonely death. The executioner's eyes flare a piercing blue as he issues his final chilling warning. Swallow this drug, and there is no returning to reality. But Segun just lowers his head into the shadows. What remaining reality does he even have to lose? His normal life died alongside his older brother. Segun suddenly lunges, snatching at the glowing capsule with reckless desperation. Except the veteran's reflexes are completely monstrous. He effortlessly clamps down on the boy's wrist with an iron grip, shutting down the hasty tantrum. Who said you could take it now? The silver-haired killer bursts out laughing, easily swatting away Segun's desperate struggle like he's brushing off a gnat. A towering, scarred veteran steps into the light, grinning wildly at the boy's reckless fire. To him, this suicidal anger is perfect clay. The rogue executioner immediately dumps the rookie onto the muscle-bound hunter. His only instruction? Break the frail kid down and rebuild him, just so he doesn't die in his very first alleyway skirmish. But Segun's fragile expectations shatter the second the executioner casually orders a smuggler's boat to Mexico. The panicked teenager chases the silver-haired hunter out into the chilly night street, completely bewildered. He honestly thought his savior was going to mentor him. The inquisitor just scoffs over his shoulder, throwing back a razor-sharp smirk. Did this delusional kid really expect a master assassin to play babysitter? Staring at the fading taillights, Segun clenches his fists and quietly absorbs the executioner's final, chilling welcome. He has officially crossed the violent threshold into a waking, blood-soaked nightmare. There is no going back to the sunlight now. Exactly 1 year passes in the shadows. Far from the bloody alleyways, a fleet of black luxury sedans rolls up to the upscale Benia Club. A ruthless gold-chain mob underboss steps onto the pavement, greeted by a massive legion of sharply dressed syndicate men bowing in perfect synchronization. The burly gangster roughly yanks his highest-ranking subordinate by the collar, aggressively reminding the sweating lackey that they run a totally legitimate corporate operation these days. So why was he urgently dragged away from his highly profitable schedule? Honestly, managing these incompetent goons must be a headache. The terrified flunky shakes like a cornered rat, barely able to string a coherent sentence together. The catastrophic answer is waiting inside the neon-lit VIP venue. The syndicate's entire squad of elite security thugs has been brutally flattened, groaning in pathetic agony across the checkered dance floor, and towering over the absolute carnage is a single, heavily armed shadow. After 12 months of absolute hell, Han Segun isn't a helpless victim anymore, he's the predator. Staring down from the neon-lit VIP balcony, the gold-chained kingpin groans in sheer disbelief at the pathetic scene below. He genuinely cannot comprehend how his entire squad of highly paid, elite muscle just got folded by a single motionless intruder. I swear, managing these useless meatheads must be a serious liability. The crime lord squints through the club's purple haze. He was urgently warned about a seasoned foreign mercenary, not a frail teenager casually blowing bubblegum amidst the wreckage. Leaning over the railing, the underboss barks down at the lone survivor, aggressively mocking the kid's violent little tantrum. The burly gangster puffs out his chest, loudly lecturing the boy on modern syndicate manners. In a civilized democracy, you don't break jaws to get what you want. You use words. Segan just tilts his head, completely unimpressed by the mobster's fake corporate facade. Why is he here? The green-haired predator bluntly reveals he already paid a massive 5 million won cash deposit to one of their street-level lackeys. Since the promised delivery mysteriously vanished, he decided to bypass customer service and collect his goods in person. The infuriated underboss violently yanks his sweating subordinate by the collar, demanding to know what exactly they were supposed to supply. Before the terrified rat can squeak out an excuse, Segan casually lists off a heavy military-grade arsenal of Russian sniper rifles and automatic weapons. The towering mobster bursts into mocking laughter. Does this clueless rookie have any concept of what black market firepower actually costs? 5 million wouldn't even buy a rusty barrel. But his smug amusement violently evaporates when the boy flawlessly exposes their entire underground smuggling network, right down to their illegal price gouging logistics. You can practically see the alarm bells ringing in the gangster's head. Realizing this armed brat is way too dangerous to entertain, the crime lord waves him off in disgust. He orders his suited legion to simply arrest the trespasser and dump him on the corrupt local police. If only disposing of a trained underworld killer was that easy. The exhausted crime lord rubs his temples, genuinely hoping this violent headache will just walk away. But the green-haired predator refuses to drop the issue. Instead, Segan casually threatens to broadcast the syndicate's highly classified drug trade straight to their fiercest rivals. Realizing this negotiation is officially dead, the furious kingpin snaps. He screams at his towering bodyguards to slice the cocky trespasser into ribbons. The furious crime boss completely loses his temper, barking at his two hulking musclemen to turn the arrogant boy into fresh sashimi. They step forward, gripping a heavy steel pipe and a razor-sharp blade. They are more than ready to slaughter the foolish teenager who dared step into their underground turf. That would be a terrifying sight for a normal high schooler. But is this kid normal? Not even close. Han Segan just casually cracks his knuckles. His expression remains dead and cold, treating these giant thugs like minor road bumps. The bald enforcers rush in swinging hard, aiming to crush his skull into a fine powder. Segan slips under the whistling bat like a phantom. He flawlessly weaves past a lethal knife thrust in the exact same breath, totally unbothered by the deadly weapons grazing his jacket. He doesn't just dodge, he shatters them. Segan buries a devastating palm strike directly into the knife wielder's jaw, practically caving in his face. He smoothly pivots away from the staggering giant, loading up his next strike. Before the second heavyweight can even blink, the green-haired survivor unleashes a brutal uppercut that launches the massive thug completely off his feet. Honestly, watching this teen dismantle seasoned killers is my new favorite hobby. Both goons crash onto the mosaic tiles, out cold. The mob boss stares at his top enforcers folded like cheap lawn chairs, his mind completely short-circuiting. Segan calmly marches up the neon-lit steps. He closes the distance until he's hovering right over the terrified syndicate leader, demanding absolute obedience. The sweating mobster stammers out, "What do you want exactly?" Our protagonist doesn't mince words. He demands a Dragunov, a Tokarev, and an AK-47, coldly stating he already paid for them. The cornered rat desperately tries to stall, claiming they don't keep heavy artillery lying around. Squeezed for a timeline, the mobster nervously secures a trade for 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. Segan dictates the exact parking lot and simply turns his back. He strides away without a second glance, leaving the furious crime lord violently cursing the little blood-soaked bastard who just humiliated his entire operation. Back at the underground club, the humiliated syndicate leader utterly snaps. He viciously backhands his subordinate across the jaw, barking for massive reinforcements. If this cocky teenager thinks he can extort a seasoned crime lord, he is dead wrong. The furious boss is definitely plotting a lethal ambush for tomorrow's weapon drop. Meanwhile, out at a remote sunset-soaked warehouse, the grizzled vampire cleaner Jung Jun is trying to make an honest living. Well, mostly honest. The scarred mercenary watches an eccentric old dealer analyze his latest haul of harvested vampire blood. Unfortunately, the quality is absolute garbage. Ju the dealer trades a heavy bag of cash for the subpar plasma, grumbling that the local bloodsucker factions are basically pathetic mutts. Jung Jun just scoffs and snatches his payout. The eccentric fence is a giant pain in the neck, but his money spends just fine. As the mercenary packs up his gear, the old man pokes a deeply sensitive nerve. He casually mentions the brutal massacre of Jungjun's family, wondering if he's heard from a certain survivor. The scarred veteran forcefully deflects. He bluntly claims the unlucky bastard is probably out slashing people up, or worse, already turned into a blood-sucking monster himself. Stepping outside into the fading sunlight, Jung Jun spots none other than Han Segun idling on a dirt bike. The veteran immediately notices the teen actively avoiding eye contact, instantly sniffing out a recent brawl. Instead of confessing to his dangerous mob shakedown, the green-haired brat eagerly asks to join the real vampire hunts. Jung Jun instantly shoots that idea down. He orders the impatient rookie to keep his head low and stick to basic training, sternly warning him not to provoke the wrong crowd. Will this reckless kid actually listen? I wouldn't bet a single dime on it. Segan easily brushes off the concern with a hollow, empty promise. Then the entire atmosphere sharply plunges into ice. Segan drops his casual facade and asks a chillingly specific question. If a situation ever arises where he absolutely must kill a human being, what is the right move? The grizzled mentor doesn't hesitate for a single microsecond. His brutal answer leaves zero room for debate. Kill them. The grizzled veteran bluntly states that if taking a life becomes absolutely necessary, hesitation is not an option. Suddenly connecting the dots, Jung-jun realizes this reckless teenager is plotting a highly dangerous scheme and forcefully throws him into a suffocating headlock. The scarred mercenary decides to literally beat some survival sense into the arrogant brat with a brutal sparring session. Fast forward to the scheduled weapon drop. Down in the shadowy depths of a desolate underground parking garage, a squad of heavily armed mobsters loiters around a luxury van. They aren't here to hand over heavy artillery, but to spring a lethal ambush on the high schooler who humiliated their boss. Lounging inside the armored vehicle, two suited enforcers loudly bicker over this pathetic assignment. These men aren't regular thugs. They are recently turned vampires bitterly complaining about acting as disposable attack dogs. Why should immortal predators waste their evening babysitting a single arrogant teenager? Their pathetic whining is violently cancelled. A heavy red fire extinguisher rockets out of the darkness, shattering the reinforced window into jagged shrapnel. The steel cylinder detonates directly against the complaining vampire's skull, transforming the luxurious van into a chaotic blender of chemical foam. The intended ambush has been spectacularly reversed, leaving Hans Sagan standing triumphantly in the dissipating smoke. He casually rests his heavy boot on an unconscious goon, having already dismantled the ordinary human bodyguards who now litter the concrete like discarded trash. Honestly, I could watch this kid completely humiliate veteran criminals all day. The ruined van doors burst open, revealing the two surviving vampires with their eyes glowing a menacing crimson. The grinning syndicate leader smugly admits they never brought the requested guns, but Sagan's cold smile doesn't falter for a microsecond. Did they really think he expected an honest transaction from treacherous bottom feeders? Straddling his revving motorcycle, the green-haired hunter smoothly draws his razor-sharp katana. The mobsters might have broken their promise, but Sagan is more than happy to collect an alternative payment. Staring down the monstrous killers, he coldly calculates that ripping out their fangs to sell on the black market will be a highly profitable consolation prize. During a brutal cage session, Young-jun drops a massive bombshell that changes everything. The very vampire that slaughtered Sagan's family might be secretly tied to the local Sangdong gang. The green-haired survivor is stunned. Bloodsuckers actively conspiring with common street thugs? He launches a furious volley of strikes to process the anger. The scarred mercenary throws a massive hook, but his student is getting faster. Sagan slips right under the sweeping arm and drives a solid fist into the older man's ribs. It's a clean tactical hit. Honestly, I would have shattered my wrist on that guy. Instead of flinching, Jung-jun just chuckles, barely registering the impact. Taking a momentary breather, the veteran asks a loaded question. Does Sagan know why Sylvester earned the terrifying title of True Demon Hunter? The kid is completely lost. Jung-jun flexes his gloves and reveals the grim truth. The rogue inquisitor actually butchered the original true demon Gyokyo. Annoyed at the cryptic lore drop, Sagan braces his guard and demands a proper explanation. Jung-jun obliges by unleashing a relentless flurry of blows. He explains that true demons boast massive power pools, completely ignoring the sun's curse. Their clan was practically untouchable vampire royalty. The sparring quickly escalates into a one-sided beatdown. The seasoned cleaner presses the assault, effortlessly deflecting the kid's strikes. He locks eyes with his desperate trainee before delivering a devastating roundhouse kick. Sagan is launched backward like a discarded toy, slamming violently into the chain-link fence as the air explodes from his lungs. Gasping on the cold mat, Sagan finally connects the dots. After Sylvester executed their leader, the mighty Jokyo clan crumbled overnight. Now those desperate remnants have allied with the human mob to track down their master's lost power and reclaim their throne. Their goal? Total resurrection. Jung-jun hauls the bruised survivor back to his feet. That brutal sparring session echoes in Sagan's mind. Young-jun drives a final punishing blow into the kid's jaw, delivering a chilling warning. The Gyokyo clan's second-in-command, the Esquire, is still alive. If the traumatized survivor recklessly makes himself a target, his life will become an unending nightmare. Snapping back to the present, Sagan is already living that nightmare. The ambush is in full swing. Still astride his dirt bike, the swordsman squares off against the two vampire mobsters. One of the pale freaks lunges, but the rider easily weaves the heavy machine out of range. Watching from the safety of their van, the older bloodsucker casually offers a hand. The younger thug instantly snaps, demanding his senior stay out of the fight. The bearded veteran bristles at the blatant disrespect, forcing the subordinate to nervously beg for a moment alone to handle the human. Segan isn't about to wait for them to resolve their domestic dispute. Gunning the engine, the green-haired survivor charges in and unleashes a vicious downward slash. But these aren't ordinary street thugs. The pale monster casually intercepts the katana with his bare forearm, taking a deep gash just to halt the blade. Tires screeching across the concrete, Segan fiercely drifts his bike to tear the steel free. He kicks up a cloud of dust, putting distance between himself and the bleeding creature. Is this kid really trying to joust with a motorcycle? Honestly, I have to respect the style. The wounded mobster just sneers, immediately recognizing the hit-and-run pattern. Fed up with playing games, he explodes off the pavement. The vampire launches himself forward like a guided missile, claws extended to rip the foolish human from his saddle. But the kid doesn't flinch. Instead of dodging, Segan coldly pulls back on the handlebars, popping a massive wheelie. He angles the heavy front tire right into the airborne monster's path, perfectly timing a brutal mechanical counter. The massive front tire connects, but Segan refuses to give his enemy a single second to breathe. Man, I absolutely love this kid's chaotic fighting style. Swinging his katana in a brutal downward arc, he forces the bleeding mobster into a panicked retreat before smoothly dismounting onto the asphalt. The pale freak refuses to go down easily. Screaming that he predicted every single move, the furious monster explodes forward with a sweeping counterattack. The green-haired survivor instinctively raises his guard, but the vampire's bare hands shatter the katana's blade completely. Sent skidding across the cold pavement, Segan furiously curses the cheap stainless steel. Did he really expect a budget mall sword to take down a true bloodsucker? The arrogant thug just cackles, mocking the fragile human before driving a sickening punch right into the boy's gut. Instead of folding, the tough kid absorbs the devastating blow just to secure his range. It is a flawlessly calculated trade. With a lightning-fast hidden strike, Segan splits the young mobster's skull wide open, forcing the dying creature to collapse and cry for his senior. The bearded veteran casually watches from the van, dryly asking if his subordinate didn't tell him to stay still. Segan just smirks, reminding them that he poured a hefty 500 million into tracking this gang. The hunter equips a colossal pneumatic gauntlet to balance the books. The wounded creature looks up in absolute, paralyzing terror. Segan's glowing eyes lock onto his prey before bringing the massive mechanical fist down in a devastating overhead smash. The street violently paints red as the older mobster watches the brutal execution in stunned silence. Stepping out from the smoke of his own brutal execution, the green-haired hunter shoots a chilling smirk toward the background. The bearded veteran finally steps out of the shadows, flashing his fangs in twisted amusement. He casually points out the bulky mechanical gauntlet, wondering if the kid is relying on museum relics to fight a true bloodsucker. Realizing this ambush was fully expected, the older monster demands to know why a fragile human would go to such extreme lengths. Segan just raises his shattered katana, crimson dripping from the jagged steel. His answer is ice cold. And the price is the mobster's head. Does this guy ever break a sweat? Dropping into a flawless combat stance, the survivor dares his target to cut the chatter and attack. The seasoned vampire just bursts into arrogant laughter, completely underestimating the threat. Bragging that he has already downloaded every single trick in the human's arsenal, the veteran explodes across the asphalt. He closes the distance in a terrifying blur, driving a lethal chop straight down at the boy's skull. With the sword snapped and the heavy glove locked in a parry, the arrogant thug is absolutely convinced he has secured the kill. Except his logic has one fatal flaw. Dropping below the lethal swipe with perfect timing, Segan effortlessly draws a concealed handgun from his jacket. The vampire's eyes widen in sheer terror right as a massive rune-carved bullet completely vaporizes his brain. Blood fountains into the night sky as the lifeless creature collapses. Peering down the smoking barrel, the victorious hunter calmly reminds the corpse that a promise is a promise. With the veteran mobster turning to ash, Segan quickly extracts a vial of the beast's blood, but his own injuries are screaming for attention. The green-haired survivor is running on fumes and bleeding fast. Knowing he has absolutely no other choice, he grinds his teeth and jams a syringe of the stolen fluid straight into his torn shoulder. The tainted serum hits his system like a sledgehammer to the spine. His eyes glitch wildly as his body violently rejects the sudden mutation, forcing his fangs out in a feral snarl. He collapses to the freezing concrete, clutching his arm and desperately trying to keep his fractured sanity intact. But rest isn't on the menu tonight. Honestly, the poor kid can't even bleed in peace. Just as he drags himself onto his bike, a familiar scarred face steps into the headlights. Jung-jun smirks, asking if the rogue hunter feels better after his little murder tantrum. Segan scowls, demanding to know how the cleaner followed him. The mercenary just taps his head with a laugh. There's this thing called GPS, kid. The veteran cleaner circles the battered motorcycle, noting how recklessly the boy has been thrashing his ride lately. You used to treat it like a sacred treasure. The older man probes, his eyes narrowing as he fishes for a reaction. What exactly changed to make this careful hunter so dangerously self-destructive? The traumatized youth refuses to take the bait. None of your business, he spits, revving the engine and peeling out into the unforgiving city night. He leaves the grinning mercenary standing alone in the empty parking lot, racing off toward whatever bloody mess he has lined up next. At that same time, the local vampire syndicate is having a spectacular meltdown. Word just reached the upper management that their senior enforcer and his entire 6-man extermination squad were completely slaughtered. The suited boss rips at his collar, his voice dripping with sarcastic venom. Brilliant, just brilliant. Vice Captain Young Sangdong sits amidst the bloody carnage of his fallen extermination squad, casually swirling a steel golf club. He's absolutely humiliated. A single teenage brat on a motorcycle has single-handedly turned the terrifying Sangdong gang into the underworld's biggest laughingstock. When a sniveling subordinate nervously suggests begging the main Jokyo clan for backup, the mob boss completely loses his mind. He swings his iron with blinding, lethal speed, instantly caving the thug's skull in and painting the office walls crimson. Stepping right over the twitching corpse without a second glance, the enraged vampire issues a chilling, absolute ultimatum. He doesn't care how many millions they have to throw at the streets. They are to hunt down this rogue hunter and slit his throat. Across town, the target in question is currently cooling off outside a dingy 24-hour convenience store. Youngjun strolls out of the sliding doors, tossing a cold iced coffee right into the battered teenager's waiting hand. Segun immediately goes on the offensive, cracking the can open. He knows the veteran cleaner was fully aware of the gang's ties to this massive Jokyo clan. So why turn a blind eye and let them operate? Is the legendary mercenary actually terrified of some undead gangsters? Jungjun just scoffs, completely unbothered. But the traumatized survivor isn't letting it go. He explodes, his voice echoing off the empty pavement, as he demands to know why anyone would let these monsters live. To Segun, vampires are a festering plague. If you don't eradicate them immediately, they destroy everything you love. The scarred old man stays ice cold, calmly pointing out that it's much easier to pluck a small weed than to chop down a giant, deeply rooted syndicate. But the green-haired kid just glares right through him. Or is it because you've never lost anything precious, old man? The green-haired survivor practically growls, demanding to know if this jaded mercenary thinks he has the right to judge who lives and dies. Gungjun just scoffs. He wouldn't crush a mosquito for ideology, he only kills for cold, hard cash. But then the scarred cleaner's eyes zero in on Segun's torn jacket. He recognizes the signs of mutation immediately, realizing the reckless kid actually injected himself with highly volatile Gyokyo blood. Rubbing his temples, the veteran lets out a heavy sigh, cursing his past deals. He drops a harsh ultimatum. Segun needs to pack his things and vanish by tonight. The old man refuses to let a suicidal teenager drag him into a massive syndicate war. Fine then, the boy snaps, turning his back on his ally. As Segun marches down the empty street, Jungjun watches him go with a heavy heart. He knows exactly what's eating the kid alive. Knowing the monsters who slaughtered your family are still breathing out there, that's enough to drive anyone completely insane. Except this cleaner isn't as heartless as he pretends. Calling out the hunter's name, Jungjun pops the trunk of a nearby car to reveal 2 massive duffel bags stuffed with enough steel and lead to start a small war. He dryly notes there are 500 rounds inside, though he highly doubts the kid will live to shoot them all. The older man issues a grim warning. The ammo is old, cheap Hungarian surplus. If Segun gets unlucky in a firefight, his weapon might just detonate right in his hands. It's a miracle this kid hasn't blown himself up already, right? The harsh reality of the gift cuts right through Segun's anger. He offers a deep, respectful bow, quietly thanking his mentor for everything. For a split second, the hardened mercenary sees the vulnerable boy he took in years ago, gently placing a heavy hand on his head. Unfortunately, soft feelings only get you killed here. Jungjun's voice drops to a deadly whisper with one final piece of advice. Don't become a vampire, because if this boy crosses that line, the man who raised him will hunt him down without mercy. Segun lowers his head in absolute silence. Meanwhile, the rogue hunter speeds down the empty highway. Staring up at the unusually bright moon, Segun can't help but feel a twisted sense of irony. It's almost too beautiful for a night soaked in so much death. Elsewhere in the city, the Sangdong gang's ruthless manhunt is already underway. A slick black sedan pulls up to a dingy underpass, interrupting a group of punks huddled around a trash can fire. The imposing enforcer, Cheon Young-hoo, steps into the flickering light and coldly demands to speak with their leader. Unfortunately, these arrogant kids are completely clueless. A red-haired delinquent just snaps a selfie, casually brushing off the veteran mobster as some annoying boomer. Pinching his nose, Cheon heavily sighs about the blatant disrespect of modern youth. That attitude is going to cost them their lives. In a flash, the suited thugs drop their human disguises, their eyes flaring a demonic red as razor-sharp fangs slide out. Honestly, these street rats are about to discover how the underworld food chain actually works. Deep inside a secluded underpass, the street gang's earlier arrogance curdles into blind panic. The hulking enforcer, Cheon Young-hoo, violently pins their red-haired ringleader to the concrete. He is fully prepared to tear the kid limb from limb, leaving the remaining runaways sobbing helplessly around a trash can fire. Before the monstrous vampire can feast, Vice Captain Young Sang-dong casually intervenes. The white-suited mobster reminds his pet brute that they actually need this street trash to hold the handlebars. Desperate to survive the night, the battered punk screams his absolute submission. Young barks at a confused flunky to fetch the cash bag from their car trunk. A heavy briefcase suddenly slams into the dirt beside the teenager's bruised face. It is a generous advance payment, but the catch is deadly. Honestly, they'd be safer throwing the money back. Crouching down, the mob boss lets his faux-friendly mask slip. He couldn't care less if they blow the cash on new motorcycles or expensive meat. There is only one ironclad demand. They must drag that green-haired survivor, Han Sagan, directly to his feet. To guarantee the message sticks, Cheon roars and lunges for a brutal physical warning. Yet Young smoothly intercepts the beast's arm, casually redirecting the impending strike away from the boy's fragile throat. Flashing a chillingly polite smile, the veteran gangster notes that their new pawn shouldn't die before the hunt even starts. He steps out to enjoy a quiet smoke, letting his monstrous subordinates collect their toll in flesh as agonizing screams echo through the concrete tunnel. Leaving the bloody tunnel behind, Vice Captain Young casually finishes his cigarette. He chuckles at the broken street punk bleeding out by his shoes, wishing aloud that crosses and garlic actually worked on his kind. It would make controlling these feral kids so much easier. Across the city, the afternoon sun casts long shadows over a quiet antique shop named Arjuna. The brunette proprietor sighs as the entry door opens, fully prepared to kick out a late customer. Except, her polite rejection dies instantly when Han Sagan steps inside. It's only been 4 months, but the traumatized boy has completely transformed. The sharp-eyed broker playfully points out his massive growth spurt, though Sagan coldly credits the muscle to artificial hormone injections. As an underground information dealer, she already knows this isn't a social call. What exactly is he hunting? Sagan demands a very specific piece of tracking gear. The dealer slides a bloodstone pendulum across the counter, explaining how the crimson gem reacts to nearby undead blood. The fatal flaw? Its maximum range is a pitiful 20 meters. That's way too close for comfort. Sagan slaps his cash down anyway. He buys it on the spot. The broker warns the reckless teenager to play things smart, offering him a specialized crossbow loaded with silver-tipped bolts. Honestly, he should take the gun. But Sagan rejects the firearm entirely. He claims he doesn't need a traditional weapon. Narrowing her eyes, the sharp businesswoman pieces together his suicidal strategy. Why would a hunter refuse steel? Unless Elder Jew cut off his supply of psychedelic moon. Sagan assumes Elder Jew simply refuses to trade with a minor. Pitying the desperate teenager, the sharp-eyed broker rummages beneath her counter to bend the rules. With a conspiratorial whisper, she reveals a glowing vial of substitute vampire blood, offering him a dangerous, under-the-table fix. The green-haired addict snatches the cylinder with blinding speed, turning to sprint out the door. The brunette dealer casually extends her palm, reminding him that secret contraband requires upfront cash. Later, bathed in the dying light of a crimson sunset, Sagan leans against a rusted railing near his motorcycle. His mind drifts back to the silver-haired hunter. That ruthless executioner was the very man who dragged him into this bloody underworld. The rogue inquisitor's freezing warning about shared misfortune still echoes in his ears. Has it really been a year already? His grim nostalgia is abruptly shattered by a grating shout. A pack of rowdy street punks surrounds his bike, marveling at his unnatural height and dyed hair. It is the exact same gang the vampire mob boss just bribed. These clueless kids actually think they've cornered helpless prey. A blonde runaway smugly asks if he remembers them. Sagan stares right through her, delivering a soul-crushing deadpan refusal. That freezing disrespect instantly shatters their faux-friendly reunion. Stepping up to the railing, the red-haired ringleader bares his teeth, fully intending to beat some manners into his former target. The red-haired ringleader gets right in his face, spewing venomous curses. Except, Han Sagan isn't the same helpless victim from a year ago. Delivering a freezing glare, the green-haired survivor bluntly asks if the kid wants to die, instantly stalling the gang's bravado. Turning away, Sagan's mind races to piece together the threat. The mob boss who hired them was walking in broad daylight, a terrifying anomaly belonging only to true demonic rulers. Worse, his newly purchased bloodstone pendulum is already vibrating in his pocket. Glancing back, the teenager spots a fresh bloodstain on the biker's collar. If you ask me, the clueless idiot didn't just take a mobster's bribe. He's actively mutating into a bloodsucker. Sagan casually asks if the Sang-dong gang sent them. Smirking, the infected runaway confirms the hit, loudly bragging about an 8 million won bounty for a live capture. Sagan would normally execute this mutating trash on the spot. Too bad there are entirely too many civilian eyes watching from the street. Instead, he coldly mocks their pitiful price tag. Enraged by the blatant disrespect, the crimson-haired punk violently grabs Segun's jacket. The teenage hunter doesn't even flinch. If these desperate runaways want to cling to their fading biker pride, why brawl like cheap alley thugs? He challenges them to settle this on the asphalt. Swallowing the bait, the gang swarms the intersection. Deafening motorcycle engines roar to life, drowning out the evening wind as they line up for a vicious cannonball street race. There are absolutely no rules. The finish line is the expressway entrance, and second place is dead meat. Revving his engine at the starting line, the infected runaway flashes a cocky smirk. He mockingly tells the green-haired survivor to take a long, hard look at the fading sunset, convinced this is the absolute last evening his prey will ever see. The teenage hunter simply scoffs at the cheap bravado. To him, this isn't a racing rivalry, it's just routine pest control. A crushed beer can suddenly slams into the asphalt, signaling the drop. Tires scream as the deathmatch officially begins. Segun and the mutating biker launch forward like missiles, tearing down the street side by side. The brutal sprint to the expressway is on, and only one rider is walking away breathing. Let's be real here. Are you actually betting against the guy who hunts monsters for a living? The mutating red-haired punk leads a pack of thugs down the asphalt, convinced he owns this city's streets. His ego is instantly shattered when Segun violently drifts his motorcycle right into their formation, making the arrogant mobster's jaw drop. They tear down the multi-lane blacktop in a suicidal cannonball run. The two rivals weave between speeding traffic and narrowly dodge a massive freight truck. Knowing one wrong twitch of the handlebars means becoming bloody roadkill. The cocky vampire laughs off the extreme danger, boldly declaring the green-haired survivor as good as dead for going a whole year without riding. Yet our protagonist stays totally frosty. He notes this punk's vampirization is spreading rapidly, but a sliver of humanity somehow remains. A grim memory of the silver-haired hunter surfaces in his mind, recalling how the rogue inquisitor warned him about the permanent weight of taking a human life. Segun's gaze hardens into ice. Does this half-breed truly need to die today? Rather than entertaining the deathmatch, Segun aggressively snaps his bike sideways and peels off the main route. The red-headed thug and his trailing lackeys are left totally bewildered. Why abandon the race now when the highway entrance was straight ahead? At that same time, inside a shady gang hideout, a veteran mob boss blows a gasket over the phone. His useless thugs claim they are locked in some romantic showdown instead of capturing the target. Honestly, henchmen get dumber every single year. A battered survivor tries to warn his superior that Segun is a walking nightmare far beyond their pay grade. Ignoring the desperate warning, the boss barks strict orders to pin the target down, but the response he gets is utterly pathetic. They already lost him. The deadly survivor finally hits the brakes at an abandoned construction site, letting his oblivious prey catch up. Furious at the sudden detour, the mutating street punk revs his engine and screams insults. He boldly accuses the green-haired rider of becoming a pathetic coward after a year in hiding. Segun doesn't even bother turning around to face the noise. He calmly murmurs that the loudmouth should have just declined the race, right before firing a suppressed pistol straight backward. A single bullet punches clean through the thug's throat, sending him crashing onto the asphalt like discarded trash. Strolling up to the bleeding wreck, our protagonist stares down with eyes completely devoid of mercy. Why do these street-level wannabes always think they can survive the big leagues? As the defeated rider chokes on his own blood, Segun delivers a chilling reality check. They never should have crossed paths. The agony of a severed artery is unbearable, yet this cold executioner suddenly offers a twisted kind of salvation. Whipping out a stolen IV bag of premium crimson fluid, Segun slices it open and orders the dying gangster to drink. Will this desperate gamble pay off? It works instantly. The thick blood coats his tongue and the lethal neck wound miraculously stops hurting. Instead, a terrifying surge of raw, unholy power floods the mobster's veins. He gulps the dark liquid down greedily, totally surrendering his humanity to the spreading infection. Segun mercilessly squeezes every last agonizing drop from the pouch. That intoxicating scent completely shatters the thug's fragile mind, violently warping him into a ravenous night stalker. With blinding white eyes and razor-sharp fangs, the newly birthed monster unleashes a deafening, blood-curdling roar. The ravenous beast prepares to strike, but Segun isn't here to play games. He instantly ignites the newly born monster in a blinding explosion of blue hellfire. The screaming Night Stalker curses his executioner as the supernatural flames peel the flesh right off his bones, reducing him to a crumbling pile of ash. Our green-haired survivor just watches the trash burn, his eyes totally devoid of mercy. Why do these street-level thugs always underestimate a true professional? Shortly after, veteran gang enforced Xian Young-Hu rolls up to the abandoned construction site with a heavily armed crew. Instead of capturing their target, they are greeted by the eerie, lingering glow of smoldering blue embers. Inspecting the melted wreckage, the bearded mobster realizes the horrifying truth. The red-haired punk was already heavily infected, and Segan didn't hesitate to execute him. A cold sweat breaks across Cheon's terrified face. They just picked a fight with an absolute apex predator. Tearing down the empty highway, Segan's iron composure finally starts fracturing. The grim warnings from his scarred mercenary mentor violently clash with the dead rider's mocking final words. Our traumatized protagonist tightens his grip on the throttle, desperately trying to mentally justify the brutal execution. He had to cross that line to stop a monster, right? But no amount of logic can wash away the suffocating weight of taking a human life. Meanwhile, the neon-lit city center remains completely oblivious to the blood-soaked shadow war happening on its outskirts. Inside a bustling local pub, the tension takes a totally different form. A nervous waitress stammers through her notepad, sweating bullets as she tries to take an order from a very intimidating new customer. Inside the cozy tavern, the terrified waitress sweats bullets while fumbling through her notepad. The intimidating blonde aristocrat simply kicks back, flashing a charming, fanged smile. I understand everything, he smoothly murmurs, flawlessly speaking her language to order a glass of premium champagne. Honestly, how does any mortal stay calm under that glowing gaze? Her brief relief is instantly shattered when a young boy violently bursts through the doors. The frantic kid urgently screams for his master. His supernatural blue eyes are wide with sheer panic, signaling a major crisis unfolding right outside the pub. Rushing out onto the chilly asphalt, the young servant frantically points out the bizarre problem. A mysterious barefoot woman draped in a hospital gown has completely collapsed against their flashy red sports car. The dapper vampire just stares down at the unconscious stranger, quietly calculating his next move. What is a battered patient doing out here? Apparently, these two aren't the type to wait for an ambulance. Tearing away down the midnight highway in their sleek ride, the young boy shoots a nervous glance over his shoulder. The runaway girl rests silently on the rear seats. Glaring ahead, the apprentice anxiously questions the massive risk they are taking, begging to just dump this random human with the local authorities. The sophisticated Night Stalker just chuckles from behind the steering wheel. His predatory eyes flare as he boldly claims that every single encounter is bound by a higher destiny. When his sidekick grumbles about his totally erratic logic, the true demon simply runs a hand through his hair. I'm a romantic, he proudly declares. High above the neon-lit city, the enigmatic aristocrat sips crimson wine and admires the skyline. His brooding peace shatters when his young apprentice, Wilhelm, marches in with a status update. As ordered, he's safely dumped the collapsed runaway at a local medical center. The sophisticated immortal praises the boy, playfully musing about visiting their new patient. Wilhelm narrows his glowing eyes, questioning this sudden obsession with a random street kid. The master just flashes a theatrical smirk. Didn't he mention he was a bit of a romantic? Not buying a single word of it, the pint-sized assistant drops onto the sofa and flips open his laptop. If his boss wants to play Prince Charming and buy flowers, he better finish his damn paperwork first. His towering boss actually considers the idea before demanding the real intel. Wilhelm hesitates before dropping the grim reality. Her name is Yoon Mi-hyun, and she's recently made the local headlines as the victim of a brutal assault by her own classmates. A sinister grin stretches across the aristocrat's face. He knew there was something dangerously special about her. Sprawled on the couch, the bored vampire reads the sickening news report while blood-red magic swirls from his phone. 6 high schoolers orchestrated the brutal attack simply because Mi-hyun dared to be arrogant. He notes that such a cold article is enough to make the victim's blood boil. Honestly, I hope she gets her revenge. But this pity party is immediately cut short. Wilhelm pulls up a fresh security feed, completely derailing the mood. A video of Sylvester just dropped into their lap. Is that relentless silver-haired hound really still poking his nose into everything? The blonde immortal casually pours a fresh glass of crimson wine. He sighs pies, wishing for a peaceful return to Korea without holy hitmen breathing down his neck. Wilhelm dryly points out that getting the rogue executioner excommunicated from the Vatican probably didn't help. Honestly, I'd hold a grudge too. Conceding the fair point, the aristocrat admits he needs to watch his old nemesis. Leaning back with a theatrical smirk, the master playfully reminds his assistant that he was ordered to work. The security feed suddenly stutters to life. It displays a severely wounded mob vampire cornered against a fence in a dead-end alley. From the thick shadows, the relentless silver-haired hound emerges. His icy blue eyes lock onto the cornered prey. The overhead camera captures the Inquisitor's slow, terrifying advance as the hunter coldly mutters the classic rites of Ash. It is a grim sentiment the lounging aristocrat echoes from the comfort of his penthouse. Trapped and bleeding out on the cold pavement, the pathetic beast actually begs for mercy. Wilhelm quietly watches his boss pace the luxurious living room. He is completely captivated by the pathetic display. The immortal scoffs at the screen. How can a creature that forcefully steals the blood of others dare to claim the sacred rights of the living? Raising his glass to the glittering city skyline, the vampire lord issues a mocking toast. challenging the doomed monster to weep and prove its innocence. Down in the gritty alleyway, the Inquisitor's cold steel presses tight against the begging creature's throat. High above, the blonde aristocrat flashes a terrifying set of predatory fangs. He knows full well that genuine tears are impossible for the undead. It is the absolute miserable limit of their cursed kind. Proving his point, the executioner mercilessly unleashes a blinding arc of holy energy. The holy blade mercilessly cleaves through the begging monster, splashing crimson across the alleyway pavement. Up in his luxury penthouse, the blonde immortal gleefully hurls his vintage wine against the reinforced glass. He's absolutely thrilled by the brutal execution. The security feed abruptly cuts to violent static. Wilhelm casually uncorks a fresh bottle while his towering boss scoffs at the predictable slaughter. I swear, these ancient lords are just drama queens with infinite budgets. The aristocrat mocks his old nemesis, declaring the violent fanatic a total failure as a poet. Far from that glittering skyline, reality is infinitely uglier for Hans Sagan. 2 miserable days have dragged by since his traumatic clash with the underworld, and the green-haired survivor hasn't kept a single meal down. He violently dry heaves into a filthy public toilet. The sickening memories refuse to fade. Traumatizing visions of slaughtered mobsters and screaming, ash-crumbling mutants relentlessly flash behind his eyes. Every time the exhausted boy blinks, the suffocating stench of burnt flesh and copper claws right back up his ruined throat. The booming voice of the vampire mob boss still haunts him, mocking the kid's arrogant right to judge who lives and dies. Wiping bitter bile from his chin, Sagan snarls at the phantom memory. Don't make him laugh. What the hell else was he supposed to do? Dragging his aching body outside, the battered survivor slumps at a cheap convenience store patio to force down some instant ramen. Yet his miserable peace doesn't last. A dense, unnatural crowd of civilians suddenly floods the darkened street. Watching them march past like mindless drones, his paranoid instincts immediately flare. Where are they all rushing to? Before he can track where that unnatural human herd is migrating, a tiny voice shatters his paranoid focus. A pink-haired teen crouches right beside his patio chair. She flashes a bizarrely cheerful smile, completely ignoring the grim atmosphere to drop an unhinged pickup line. Does he know he looks exactly like Kurt Cobain? The traumatized survivor just blinks. He's used to street preachers begging for his soul, but this is a totally new flavor of crazy. Unfortunately, their weird little moment doesn't last. A pack of local thugs aggressively swarms the alley, grabbing the squeaking girl before their scarred leader glares down at the seated stranger. Sagan wants absolutely zero part in this pathetic street drama. Bone-tired and nauseous, the green-haired boy simply stands up and walks away, completely ignoring the surrounding gang. Big mistake, the humiliated alpha refuses to be ignored. Snarling vicious insults, the thug snatches the kid's shoulder to force a confrontation. The mobster never even registers the counterattack. Sagan instantly pivots, whipping a devastating backhand straight through the aggressor's jaw. Cartilage crunches beneath his knuckles. A thick arc of crimson splatters across the pavement as the local tough guy crashes down into a pathetic heap. Witnessing the sudden violence, the rescued girl clutches her cheeks in absolute starry-eyed awe. Seriously, what is wrong with this city's youth? Standing over the bleeding wreck, the cold-blooded survivor casually adjusts his jacket. He delivers a deadpan apology to the groaning punk. He just thought a nasty bug landed on him. Staring at the fresh crimson dripping into his palms, the battered street punk is paralyzed by sheer disbelief. Sagan just stares down at him, offering a deadpan apology while claiming he simply thought a bug had landed on the guy's face. The bleeding thug doesn't find the excuse amusing. He screeches from the pavement, spitting threats and demanding to know if this crazy bastard has a death wish. Ignoring the temper tantrum, our green-haired survivor casually shoves his hands in his pockets and strolls away into the night. Naturally, street gangs don't handle rejection well. The rest of the alleyway crew refuses to let their boss get humiliated, barking for Sagan to stop before they slaughter him right there on the street. That specific threat makes Sagan halt in his tracks. He glances back, a chilling darkness settling over his features. "Kill me, a person?" he mutters, pivoting around to face them. "You guys, of all people?" While the tension reaches a boiling point, the pink-haired teen they were harassing earlier decides this is her cue to check out. She smoothly pops in her earbuds, taps her phone screen, and lets a blasting rock track drown out the impending carnage. Honestly, good for her. As her music swells, Sagan kicks off his own violent rhythm. A heavy boot explodes into a charging thug's chest, lifting the guy completely off the ground. When the next wannabe gangster throws a wild haymaker, Sagan effortlessly parries the strike, steps inside the guard, and delivers a brutal bone-crunching elbow straight to the jaw. The alley becomes a one-sided slaughterhouse. A leather-jacketed enforcer rushes in, swinging a desperate cross, but Sagan slips under it like a phantom. He immediately fires back with a piston-like right hook, burying his knuckles deep into the man's face. The final thug crumples to the asphalt like cheap patio furniture, leaving the traumatized survivor standing completely untouched amidst the groaning bodies. the one-sided massacre, perfectly matches the upbeat rhythm blasting from the pink-haired teenager's earbuds. Desperate to salvage his gang's bruised ego, a thug in a long coat whips out a butterfly knife, spinning the blade with practiced ease. He genuinely expects this flashy street trick to intimidate his target. He couldn't be more wrong. Before the gangster can even finish his little routine, Segan blitzes into striking range like a runaway train. A blistering counterattack catches the man completely flat-footed, launching him backward. He crashes hard into the asphalt, skidding helplessly across the ground, while our green-haired survivor barely even breaks a sweat. Seriously, this guy is treating a gang ambush like a light stretching exercise. But there are no referees in a back alley brawl. While Segan watches his opponent eat dirt, a hidden attacker lunges from his blind spot. A blade flashes in the darkness, tearing a deep gash across the back of Segan's coat. The final standing gangster, a battered enforcer in a white puffer jacket, stumbles back with a cocky smirk, totally convinced he just landed a fatal game-winning strike. Unfortunately for him, that shallow cut merely signs his death warrant. Segan slowly pivots to face the man, and the atmosphere instantly suffocates. He doesn't flinch. He just locks onto the thug with a dead, hollow stare, the absolute indifference of someone who slaughters supernatural monsters for a living. Beneath that icy gaze, the enforcer's arrogant grin completely crumbles, replaced by cold, paralyzing dread. Fueled entirely by cornered panic, the enforcer screeches and lashes out, swinging his knife in wide, frantic arcs. It's a pathetic last stand. Segan effortlessly slips through the chaotic flurry, swatting the man's wrist to disarm the blade. Without missing a beat, he steps inside the guard and buries a merciless, bone-shattering punch straight into the thugg's face, instantly putting him to sleep. With the rest of the gang completely dismantled, Han Segan turns his dark attention back to the bleeding street boss who started this entire mess. Dropping the captured butterfly knife onto the asphalt, the green-haired survivor violently yanks the terrified thug right off the pavement. He stares dead into the mobster's trembling eyes, mockingly reminding the gangster of his bold threat to take a human life. Segan doesn't just want a pathetic apology, he wants to permanently shatter the man's arrogant spirit. He unleashes a savage, bone-crushing barrage of heavy knee strikes straight into the boss's face, roaring for the battered punk to make good on his words. The street leader is violently hurled down the alley steps, crashing like discarded trash, right at the feet of the pink-haired teenager. Segan aggressively towers over the whimpering wreckage, his furious screams echoing endlessly off the dark brick walls. The teenage girl just watches the brutal display in silent awe, her upbeat rock track still blasting through her earbuds. But the sheer adrenaline keeping our rogue inquisitor on his feet is finally burning out. Segan slowly turns away, hot blood pouring freely from the deep gash on his back. Despite the lethal, agonizing wound, a chilling, hollow smile creeps across his bruised face. Why is he smiling? Probably because ordinary street thugs are an absolute joke compared to the supernatural vampire nightmares he usually slaughters. He attempts to proudly limp off into the night, but his battered body suddenly hits its absolute limit. Segan abruptly faceplants into the asphalt, collapsing motionless in a massive pool of his own blood. Left with no other option, the pink-haired teen unplugs her music and cautiously approaches the unconscious survivor. Miles away from that blood-soaked alleyway, the brutal carnage of the night eventually gives way to a peaceful, sunlit morning. Inside a quiet local cafe, a young female worker casually mops the pristine hardwood floors, blissfully unaware of the violent chaos surrounding the city's hidden supernatural underworld. Wiping sweat from her brow, the busy cafe worker sighs. She wonders aloud if she finally needs to hire a part-timer to handle the morning rush. Her mundane domestic troubles are abruptly interrupted. A sleek jet-black sports car pulls up right outside her shop's window. The brunette's face immediately lights up. She happily calls out to the new arrival, teasingly greeting him as Sylvie. Stepping out of the luxury ride is the towering silver-haired hunter, clad in his signature black trench coat and priest collar. He shoots her a deadpan glare, flatly reminding her to never use that ridiculous nickname. Ignoring his grumpy mood, the barista steps outside to ask why the rogue inquisitor returned from his hunt ahead of schedule. The executioner simply stares into the distance, his icy blue eyes unreadable. His reason for coming back early? He just really likes reading Dostoevsky. I guess even lethal vampire hunters need some classic literature to unwind. The green-haired survivor jolts awake in an unfamiliar pitch-black bedroom. Agony immediately flares from a gruesome, gaping wound carved into his back. He heavily struggles to his knees, utterly disoriented by the brutal pain. When exactly did he lose consciousness? Surveying the dark disaster zone, Segan realizes he is trapped in an absolute pigsty. Several unfamiliar girls are passed out across the filthy floor. He slowly peels a flimsy, bloody tissue off his horrific injury. You really call this first aid? A pink-haired teenager suddenly stirs from the messy mattress beside him. She takes one terrified look at his blood-soaked torso and freezes in absolute panic. Meanwhile, the wounded fighter coldly calculates if he can actually survive walking outside in this state. Then she does the completely unthinkable. Instead of calling for an ambulance, the desperate girl crawls straight toward his lap. She leans in dangerously close, quietly offering her body to the bleeding man. What kind of twisted survival logic is this? Sagun leaps backward like he just touched a live electrical wire. He violently rejects her unhinged advance, demanding to know what is wrong with her brain. The mortified teenager immediately shrinks away, nervously twiddling her thumbs in shame. Honestly, I'd need a stiff drink to process this level of absolute crazy. The traumatized protagonist just stares blankly ahead, completely drained of all remaining willpower. Breaking the heavy, awkward silence, the girl weakly confesses the real issue. She is just severely irritable from starving in this room for several days. Staring up with desperate, pleading eyes, she begs him to take her along to get food. That pathetic request completely shatters the heavy tension. A few minutes later at a local convenience store, the ravenous teenager absolutely annihilates a steaming bowl of instant ramen. Sagun simply watches her gorge herself, ending his incredibly bloody night in exhausted silence. Sagun stands over the ravenous teenager, silently watching her devour instant ramen on his dime. Seeking some clarity, he awkwardly points out that the slaughtered punks back in the apartment weren't exactly her boyfriends. The pink-haired survivor just shrugs, casually admitting she only followed the creeps so she wouldn't get lost. That absurd logic completely breaks the battle-hardened fighter's brain. He mutters under his breath, wondering if he just rescued an actual toddler. Outside the glowing convenience store windows, ordinary morning traffic marches past, entirely oblivious to the bloody underworld slaughter that just unfolded. Studying the teenager's dirt-smudged face, Han Sagun quietly wonders if she's trapped in the same hellish nightmare he is. Pushing those heavy thoughts aside, the exhausted survivor finally cracks open his own cheap cup of spicy noodles. Man, nothing hits the spot quite like sodium after a near-death experience. The comfortable silence breaks when the girl flashes a blindingly innocent smile, brightly introducing herself as Jin Yu Mi. Without missing a single beat, the cold protagonist just slurps his broth and bluntly replies that he didn't ask. Sunlight washes over their bizarre breakfast date, bringing fresh disasters elsewhere. At a massive hospital across town, absolute chaos shatters the morning peace. A furious civilian screams at the overwhelmed medical staff, his frantic voice echoing down the pristine corridors. How on earth does a secure facility let a recovering kid just sneak out the front door? While a pale patient peers out from her room, the desperate father physically grabs a doctor by the collar. He violently demands to know who will take responsibility if his runaway daughter, who already almost died on the streets, perishes out there alone. Sadly for this grieving loudmouth, the silver-haired hunter strolls in right on cue, carrying a pristine bouquet of blood-red flowers. Amused by the temper tantrum, the rogue inquisitor politely asks to interrupt. Before the irate dad can even curse him out, the executioner raises one hand and sharply snaps his fingers right in the man's face. The hunter's sharp finger snap triggers a massive, area-wide psychological attack. The irate civilian and the surrounding medical staff completely freeze in their tracks. Their pupils dilate into dull red voids as a swirling, psychedelic hallucination washes over the entire corridor. The rogue inquisitor simply strolls past the mesmerized human statues without batting an eye. He stops outside room 208, finding a pale, black-haired patient trembling in the doorway. Musing aloud, the executioner coldly notes that ordinary mortals are incredibly fragile. If a grueling year trapped inside this sterile medical prison hadn't already shattered her mind, she would have never tried escaping into the dangerous streets yesterday. Approaching the stunned runaway, he extends the vibrant crimson flowers. He smoothly apologizes for ruining her grand escape and dumping her back into this miserable facility. When asked to come along, the cornered girl just stares in absolute dread. Flashing a wicked, fanged grin, the killer cheerfully clarifies her dire situation. This is officially a kidnapping. Soon, the bizarre duo cruises across a sunlit suspension bridge in a flashy red sports car. The Inquisitor casually rings up an underworld contact, demanding an extensive wardrobe of women's clothing. Burying her face in the roses, his hostage suddenly bursts into manic laughter, outright mocking his terrible sense of humor. Honestly, trauma really scrambles survival instincts. Except their twisted little morning joyride doesn't last much longer. Without a single warning second, a catastrophic ear-splitting impact suddenly obliterates the side of the speeding vehicle. Shards of reinforced glass violently explode through the cramped cabin. A blinding, crushing force tears directly into the metal chassis, instantly turning their peaceful escape into a chaotic death trap. Who on earth just ambushed the executioner? That catastrophic impact wasn't some random traffic collision. It was a pinpoint, heavy artillery assassination attempt. Inside the shredded sports car, the rogue inquisitor uses his own body to completely shield the trembling runaway from the explosive shrapnel. Smoking, armor-piercing rounds are lodged deeply across his broad back, tearing his pristine coat to ribbons. He doesn't even flinch. Instead, his mismatched eyes glow with a sadistic thrill as he softly curses his unseen attacker. Talk about having skin as thick as a tank. High above the panicked morning traffic, a towering marksman casually lowers his smoking, anti-material sniper rifle. Perched directly on a dizzying skyscraper ledge, this lethal phantom resembles a twisted priest with his dark clerical collar and flowing white hair. This ghost never misses. Smoothly racking the massive bolt, he coldly studies the shattered vehicle miles away. His pupils flare with a piercing blue light as he cheerfully asks if his explosive opening shot was a polite enough greeting. If it takes military-grade ballistics just to say hello, this blood-soaked city is in for an absolute massacre. At a high-end luxury estate, the silver-haired hunter struts through the lobby like he owns the damn place. His rescued hostage trudges beside him in a drab hospital gown, nervously clutching a bouquet of crimson roses. The rogue inquisitor casually dismisses the bowing staff, ordering his suited subordinates to fetch the girl a proper change of clothes. But hospitality isn't his main priority right now. He drops a handful of mangled, crushed lead into his associate's open palm. The subordinate breaks into a cold sweat. He realizes the mysterious white-haired sniper unloaded 6 rapid-fire shots directly at the girl in the blink of an eye. If those rounds had been standard silver, it would be over. The sharp-dressed killer flashes a dangerously smug grin. Actually, the reality is much worse. If those rounds had pierced her skin, she wouldn't have just bled out. The silver particles would have forcibly mutated the fragile hostage into a blood-sucking fiend right on the spot. His associate just sighs in relief, dryly praising the normally ruthless inquisitor for his uncharacteristic, gentlemanly restraint. Far from the safety of luxury hotels, Han Sagan's night is violently crashing down around him. His battered dirt bike is completely fried, hissing smoke after dragging him through a literal war zone. The green-haired survivor drops onto a park bench and buries his scarred face in his hands. It's an absolute miracle the tortured engine didn't explode an hour ago. He'd love to dump the useless scrap metal at a mechanic, but buying a new ride requires actual cash, and staring into his entirely empty wallet hurts worse than a physical beating. He's totally broke. To make matters worse, Ju flat out refused to buy his harvested vampire blood because Segun is technically underage. He desperately needs a new black market fence, fast. Before the teenager can brainstorm a tactical solution to his poverty, a wildly out-of-place face pops into his vision. A cheerfully annoying girl practically ambushes him from behind the bench, beaming brightly as she loudly addresses him as Kurt Cobain. Segun just stares blankly at the upside-down intruder. His problems are only just beginning. The obnoxious intruder casually plops onto the park bench right next to our battered protagonist, dramatically whining about her numb legs. Without missing a beat, she cheerfully asks where they're heading next. The exhausted teenager just stares blankly at her. Does she seriously think they're veteran partners in crime? Desperate to ditch the unwanted baggage, he orders her to go find her friends. Unfortunately for him, the pink-haired nuisance violently kicks her legs, complaining that her crew already ditched her for their boyfriends. Hoping to finally shake her off, the green-haired survivor grabs his fried dirt bike and tries a different tactical approach. He coldly asks if her parents are going to freak out that she's roaming a dangerous city so late. He instantly regrets the interrogation. The girl's annoyingly bright demeanor completely shatters as she looks down at the pavement, quietly admitting she's an orphan. Well, now he just feels like a massive jerk. The kid might be a hardened survivor, but he's not heartless. With a heavy sigh of defeat, Sagan tells the runaway to hop on so he can drop her off somewhere safe. Minutes later, the mysterious stray is resting quietly against his back as they cruise down the desolate midnight highway. See, this runaway wasn't always wandering the dangerous streets, looking for cheap thrills. She was once trapped in a miserably suffocating home under the crushing heel of a tyrannical father. During one particularly brutal domestic dispute, the violent patriarch actually screamed at his own daughter to just go die. Pushed to her absolute limit, the desperate girl viciously wished for the exact same thing. She decided she would rather perish than live as his controlled possession. A horrific, fiery car crash quickly granted her dark rebellion. With her parents wiped out in a literal blaze of twisted irony, the newly untethered orphan was left completely alone to face the grim aftermath. Since that haunting funeral, she has fully abandoned herself to the chaotic frenzy of the streets. She repeats a reckless cycle of self-destruction every single day, a dangerous spiral that has just landed her squarely on the back of our broke protagonist's motorcycle. As they tear down the asphalt, the scarred survivor silently listens to the runaway's chaotic rambling. He knows he can't magically fix her shattered reality or take responsibility for her trauma. Yet beneath the wind howling past them, her fractured stories are starting to click into a grim puzzle. Does he understand this broken kid so perfectly because they share the same reckless, orphaned wavelength? Or is it something far worse? A haunting memory violently flashes across his vision. A dangerous girl from his past whispering a fatal midnight proposition. He furiously grits his teeth, muttering a curse at the crazy memories trying to drag him back under. Shaking off the ghosts, the green-haired rider mercilessly cranks the throttle. The sudden acceleration nearly launches his unwanted passenger off the back, ripping a startled shriek from her lungs as they blur past the city limits. Sometimes, sheer speed is the only tactical advantage you have against your own head. The tortured dirt bike eventually screeches to a heavy halt outside a quiet residential block. Segan flatly orders the stray to head inside, immediately turning his front wheel toward the shadows. He's done his good deed for the night. Unfortunately for his clean escape, a desperate shout freezes him in place. The pink-haired nuisance completely drops her annoying bravado, clutching her hands as she nervously asks when she can see him again. The hardened survivor pauses. Staring into the dark, he quietly offers to split a cheap convenience store breakfast with her next time. It's barely a lifeline, yet it's exactly what she needs to hear. Cruising back into the desolate night, his tactical problems return with a vengeance. The dying engine violently sputters beneath him. If he keeps riding this battered metal memento, it's going to turn into his literal coffin. The exhausted teenager glares into the darkness. He desperately needs a fast, highly profitable gig before his wallet bleeds out completely. As the broke protagonist stews in his absolute poverty, his wheezing scrap heap rolls past a sleek, hyper-expensive sports car parked silently on the curb. The universe really loves rubbing salt in an open wound. Desperate for fast cash, the exhausted survivor pushes through a local cafe door. Unfortunately, his hunt for a quick payday hits a highly lethal snag. A voice suddenly calls out the name Sylvester, making a tall man casually glance over his shoulder. It's the exact same white-haired sniper who just ambushed the Inquisitor. Inside a quiet downtown cafe, the green-haired survivor casually corners the exact man who recently tried to blow his head off. The rogue Inquisitor isn't exactly thrilled by the reunion. Buried under a mountain of tedious commission paperwork, the silver-haired executioner slams his pen down in utter frustration. Bureaucracy is every assassin's worst nightmare. Glaring up with venomous blue eyes, the veteran hunter issues a grim warning to the boy. He figures the kid has either grown remarkably arrogant or he's nursing a pathetic death wish. Undeterred by the lethal hostility, the traumatized youth merely clenches his scarred fist tight. He isn't here to trade empty street threats. He desperately needs intel and refuses to back down. Across the table, a civilian informant calmly sips her black coffee before sliding over a faded photograph of seemingly innocent schoolgirls. This isn't a social call, it's a desperate plea for a violent rescue. Unluckily for our rogue sniper, he quickly realizes his partner for this bloody job is an absolute, insufferable brat. At that exact moment, heavy rain batters the neon signs of a shady massage parlor. Deep inside the dimly lit back rooms, the atmosphere is suffocatingly thick with murderous intent. A crew of hardened mafia thugs glares down at an unexpected pint-sized intruder. Lounging arrogantly on the sofa, the red-haired mobster aggressively sizes up the bizarre trespasser. Standing completely unfazed in the center of the lion's den is a tiny vampire envoy clutching a secured briefcase. Why would a deadly syndicate send a literal child into gang territory? He represents the infamous Phantasmagoria clan, yet he looks laughably human. The muscle-bound underworld thugs mock the boy immediately, assuming a delusional stray puppy just wandered in. But this little bloodsucker bites back with lethal precision. Flashing a pair of terrifyingly radiant eyes, the brat strikes a massive raw nerve. He openly mocks the gangsters for losing their own master, leaving them completely defenseless. One hulking thug instantly erupts in blind rage, screaming about a demon hunter's cowardly interference. Before things get bloody, the seated enforcer sharply commands him to shut his mouth. A massacre is brewing. Regaining his composure, the red-haired mobster orders the brat to state his business and get out. Instead of answering right away, the pint-sized vampire kicks a heavy silver briefcase sliding across the floor. The gang leader scoffs at the cash, pointing out that taking down the legendary demon hunter who slaughtered their boss requires way more funding than this. But the tiny envoy shuts down that misconception instantly. He isn't here to fund a suicide mission against an untouchable executioner. None of them are strong enough for that. Reaching into his pristine white jacket, the arrogant child explains he wants a much weaker, infinitely more accessible target dead. He tosses a faded photograph onto the coffee table. Staring back at the gangsters is none other than Han Segan. The Phantasmagoria clan demands the absolute destruction of Sylvester's new disciple, and they are paying top dollar for his head. Given a massive bounty for a simple hit, the atmosphere in the room completely shifts. The red-haired vampire casually asks for the target's location, expecting a silver platter assassination. The boy offers a vague district in Seoul, flatly telling the syndicate they'll have to earn their keep by tracking him down themselves. What a terribly demanding client. But before the mobsters can complain about the lack of intel, one of the muscle-bound thugs recognizes the face in the picture. He starts sweating bullets. It's the exact same chaotic high schooler who recently crashed their nightclub. Realizing their prey is just some foolish teenager playing mercenary, the red-haired gangster flashes a wicked, bloodthirsty grin. To a crew of hardened vampires, this assignment sounds like an absolute walk in the park. Meanwhile, heavy rain continues to drown the neon-lit streets of the sleeping city. A massive storm is brewing, and a whole army of blood-starved predators is about to descend on our traumatized survivor. Far above the rain-slicked streets, the rogue sniper and his new pint-sized partner gaze out over the glowing city skyline. This isn't exactly a heartwarming adoption. Staring blankly at the glass, the cynical schoolgirl bluntly demands to know why a wealthy, untouchable immortal would ever take an interest in a broken kid like her. Flashing a terrifying luminescent stare, the veteran marksman shrugs it off as a twisted sense of kinship. He casually offers to grant her absolutely any wish she desires. Instead of asking for a better life, the traumatized teenager flatly states she wants to go exactly where her dead loved ones are. That morbid request strikes a massive agonizing nerve. The ancient vampire solemnly explains the horrific reality of outliving a natural human lifespan. Eternity is a relentless, rotting curse. The longer an immortal survives, the louder the phantom voices of the dead scream in their ears. It's an incurable madness that vividly incites endless destruction. Despite the agonizing chorus of ghosts echoing in his skull, the weary predator refuses to surrender to the slaughter. He strictly values sheer endurance over indulging in bloody pleasure. Looking down at his gloomy new accomplice, the sniper insists that finding something worth protecting makes even the blistering flames of hell feel somewhat sweet. He isn't trying to force his archaic values on her, but he genuinely promises that staying alive will eventually bring a glimmer of hope. But this cynical brat is completely immune to empty inspirational speeches. Peering at her own hollow reflection in the storm-battered window, she coldly brands the ancient killer a massive liar. Has enduring decades of pain actually brought him any genuine peace? The sniper's confident smile vanishes. Caught in his own hypocrisy, he stares out at the crying city and quietly admits defeat. There were only ever a few fleeting days when he could actually stomach his own pathetic lie. Moving past their philosophical stalemate, the rogue sniper realizes this broken teenager has absolutely zero lingering attachment to humanity. It's a massive problem, but also a twisted opportunity. Slicing open his own flesh with razor-sharp precision, the ancient executioner decides that gifting her the bloody power of revenge isn't such a terrible idea. Without a second of hesitation, he pulls the unfazed schoolgirl close and initiates a dark baptism. If you thought they were just going to hug it out, you're definitely watching the wrong show. The storm rages outside as he violently drags her into his eternal nightmare, transforming a desperate victim into his newest immortal kin. Moments later, the pint-sized vampire envoy returns to the penthouse to report on his mafia negotiations, only to freeze dead in his tracks. Staring at the gruesome aftermath of a fresh turning, the terrified messenger screams for his master. Lounging calmly on the floor with his newly minted disciple, the veteran killer flashes a terrifyingly radiant smirk. He extends a blood-soaked hand toward the trembling boy. "You should come over too before I change my mind." The hunt for Han Sagan just got a whole lot deadlier. A torrential downpour absolutely hammers the dark asphalt as Han Sagan tears down the highway, his motorcycle slicing through the storm like a bullet. The green-haired rogue is on a one-way collision course with a bloodbath. Yet, his piercing eyes are distant, his mind completely hijacked by a ghost of a recent conversation. See, earlier that evening at a deserted coffee shop, the boy had a profoundly tense standoff with the silver-haired hunter. The rogue inquisitor didn't mince words, flat out calling Sagan a hideous man for his ruthless methods. Dealing with monsters is one thing, but who wants a lecture from a seasoned executioner? The priest washes his hands of the boy's reckless nature, warning him that their upcoming target has grown disgustingly soft from indulging in wealth. But a cornered rat still bites. He flat out doubts if this arrogant kid truly intends to save humanity. "Honestly, I'd pay good money to see these two throw down." "It's not like you're a god," the veteran spits out, sitting with his back firmly turned. Sagan bristles at the disrespect. He isn't about to swallow a morality pill from a killer. The green-haired teen shoots a glare, demanding to know what the clergyman plans to do instead. Instead of an answer, the priest turns, his eyes flashing with an eerie, icy blue light. He levels 2 fingers right at the boy's skull. Bang! The mock execution hangs in the heavy air, a blatant reminder of who holds the real power in this room. Sagan just drops his gaze, utterly unimpressed by the theatrical threat. Let the old man play his mind games. Without uttering another useless syllable, the stubborn hunter spins on his heel and strides toward the exit, totally done wasting his night on this lecture. Except his grand exit is abruptly interrupted. The priest barks his name, casually tossing a small object through the air. Sagan's reflexes kick in, snapping his hand out to catch it mid-flight. He opens his palm to reveal a strange bicolored capsule pulsing with a highly suspicious energy. The Inquisitor drops one final massive piece of intel. This target isn't just a random thug. He is the ultimate object of hatred for the very woman taken in by the Vampire King. He tells the hot-headed teen to choose his next moves wisely. It's a heavy burden, but someone has to carry it. The memory shatters as the priest's final warning echoes. Don't do anything stupid. Back in the freezing, violent rain, Segan just grips his throttle harder, twisting it until the engine screams. He has his target, he holds the trump card, and playing it safe has never once been on his agenda. Out in the torrential downpour, the green-haired protagonist pushes his motorcycle to the absolute limit. His engine screams over the storm, but this solitary midnight ride is abruptly crashed by a massive red-eyed bat circling directly overhead. Is that an aerial scout? Before the young hunter can even process the flying rat, a much deadlier problem bites at his heels. A monstrous, mutated hound bursts from the highway shadows, its jaws slavering and ready to tear the teenager apart. This isn't your average stray. A jagged, glowing crystal is brutally embedded right in its skull. The hellhound lunges with terrifying speed, forcing Segan to violently twist his handlebars and swerve into the next lane just to keep his leg from becoming dog food. He slams the brakes, his tires aggressively drifting across the slick asphalt as he's forced to a dead halt. Standing casually in the center of the road are his real targets. The arrogant red-haired mobster flashes a sinister smirk, confirming to his imposing, bearded veteran partner that this is indeed the kid their boss warned them about. I wouldn't smile just yet, Fangs. Surrounded on the deserted bridge, Segan refuses to waste a single breath on villainous monologues. He immediately draws a heavy pistol, leveling the cold steel straight through the freezing rain. The cocky gang leader just laughs off the threat like it's a hilarious joke. He openly mocks the boy, sarcastically asking how a high schooler managed to smuggle a real firearm into South Korea. The stubborn hunter answers by ripping his throttle wide open. He pops a vicious wheelie, launching the roaring dirt bike directly at the mobster's chest to crush him like an insect. But the red-haired monster doesn't even flinch. In a terrifying display of raw supernatural strength, the younger vampire catches the violently spinning front tire with a single bare hand. He halts the screaming machine completely dead in its tracks. The arrogant mobster thinks he just won the physical exchange, but he drastically underestimated his prey. Segan already used the bike's forward momentum to lean in, closing the gap before the vampire could blink. Right now, he has the barrel of his illegal handgun pressed directly against the creature's temple. Checkmate, bloodsucker. Without hesitation, Segan pulls the trigger. A deafening gunshot shatters the storm as the smuggled pistol discharges point-blank into the younger vampire's face. But supernatural durability is a total cheat code. The arrogant mobster merely recoils with a startled yelp, completely surviving a bullet that would turn a human skull into a canoe. Using the brutal recoil, the green-haired hunter kicks off his stalled bike, executing a flawless backflip through the freezing downpour to put some much-needed distance between them. He sticks the landing on the slick asphalt just as his ruined motorcycle crashes to the earth behind him. The kid is lethal, tactical, and entirely unfazed. He slowly rises, his eyes burning with an intense, icy blue aura as he glares at his monstrous prey. Did that surprise attack actually do any damage? Hardly. The red-haired gangster casually wipes a thin trickle of blood from a minor scratch on his cheek. Are you kidding me? A close-range headshot, and he barely gets a paper cut. The bearded older vampire just watches the display with total apathy, dryly noting that the high schooler actually has some decent moves. Instead of defending his partner, the imposing veteran flat-out calls the younger bloodsucker totally incompetent, leaving the cocky punk absolutely fuming at the insult. Segan isn't waiting around for their little domestic dispute to finish. He draws a second handgun, quickly doing the grim math in his head. 3 rounds left for the Tokarev, 5 for the Type 54. He aggressively racks the slide of his secondary weapon, but the bitter reality is sinking in fast. Even if he empties both magazines into these monsters, conventional lead just isn't going to cut it against these freaks. Well, anyway, the younger vampire sighs, finally dropping the playful act. In a horrifying display of raw demonic biology, his entire right arm violently bursts open, erupting into a grotesque cluster of jagged, spiked tentacles. The monstrous appendages thrash in the rain as the mobster flashes a sadistic grin, wondering aloud if he should replenish the tiny drop of blood he just lost. This guy is practically begging for a stake through the heart. But playing defense is for cowards. Refusing to be intimidated by the twisted display, Segan roars a furious battle cry and charges directly at the undead duo. He levels both pistols at the sky as the twin vampires suddenly launch themselves into the storm, spreading massive bat-like wings to completely dominate the airspace. If these bloodsuckers think they own the night, they're about to get a lethal wake-up call. The green-haired hunter unloads his dual Tokarevs into the stormy night sky, desperately trying to shred his airborne targets. The silver-laced hail proves completely useless against their erratic flight patterns. The bearded veteran mocks his pathetic firepower. A standard pistol won't cut it. Segan slides across the slick asphalt, keeping his triggers pinned as the twin freaks touch down. Their crimson eyes glow through the downpour like demonic traffic lights. Is there any way out of this slaughterhouse? Forget escaping. The older mobster closes the distance instantly, his massive frame looming over the dual wielder. He taunts his prey right before unleashing a brutal, sweeping claw strike. Segan drops his center of gravity just in time, feeling the lethal breeze skim his scalp. I love watching a cornered animal bite back. Instead of retreating, our reckless lead leans into the danger. He ejects a spent magazine mid-dodge, chambering fresh silver rounds right in the middle of a chaotic three-way melee. He pivots, aiming a point-blank execution shot straight at the younger creature's skull. The red-haired freak doesn't even blink. He just flashes a chilling smirk as the muzzle flashes inches from his nose. A deafening crack echoes across the empty highway. The bullet should have scrambled his brain. So much for a clean kill. Sharp, jagged tentacles erupt from the darkness, wrapping around Sagan's wrist like steel cables. His firing arm is completely immobilized. The hunter grunts in agony, finally realizing he just walked straight into a death trap. The red-haired freak effortlessly hurls the restrained hunter high into the stormy skies. Gravity takes over, and Sagun crashes onto the flooded highway with bone-rattling force. He is completely outmatched by these monstrous appendages. Refusing to just roll over and die, our dual-wielder desperately levels his pistol from the pavement. The younger monster scoffs, violently twisting Sagan's trapped wrist backward. He demands to know how long his prey plans to play tough. The answer is violently cut short. I wouldn't bet on the human right now. Those spiked limbs launch him backward into the rain, slamming him ruthlessly into the asphalt. The tentacled mobster gloats that basic weapons are absolutely worthless here. Sagun lies paralyzed, gasping for air. His vision blurs as the two towering vampires casually stroll toward his broken body. The younger creature stares down at the mess he made, clicking his tongue in utter disappointment. See, hovering near death brings a fleeting memory of a smiling pink-haired girl from his past. Is this really the miserable end of his crusade? The green-haired fighter snaps awake, coughing a dark puddle onto the ruined highway. He barely pushes himself up when a barbed whip coils tightly around his ankle. The red-haired mobster doesn't even break stride, effortlessly dragging the battered hunter across the rough pavement like a slab of butcher's meat. The victorious creature leans in, flashing a terrifying row of jagged fangs. He grins widely, declaring that it is finally time to eat. Unfortunately for him, a mysterious sniper round suddenly erupts straight through the center of the vampire's skull. The older vampire stares in absolute shock as his partner collapses into a ruined heap of gore. Enraged by the sudden execution, the gray-haired mobster roars into the storm, demanding to know who fired the lethal shot. Who would dare interrupt their hunt? Jung-jun emerges from the shadows, leveling a suppressed weapon at the surviving freak. The scarred mercenary brutally berates Sagun for fighting without using psychedelic moon, demanding to know if this suicidal recklessness is what he taught him. The surviving mobster doesn't care about their little reunion. He unleashes a massive barrage of black tentacles, charging straight at the new threat. Too bad his parlor tricks are useless here. Jung-jun remains dead calm, gracefully slicing through the deadly appendages with a massive blade. The veteran cleaner seamlessly pumps his shotgun, blasting the airborne creature right in the center of its chest. The explosive force sends the towering monster stumbling backward across the flooded asphalt. I love seeing a true professional handle pest control. Realizing he's suddenly completely outmatched, the surviving vampire curses his luck. Instead of fighting to the death, he immediately retreats into the dark forest, leaving his dead partner behind. Back on the highway, Sagan forces himself up. Despite his battered state, the dual-wielder insists on chasing the fleeing target. Jung-jun shuts that down instantly, ordering the injured hunter to drain the dead freak's blood and go guard their primary objective. Left alone in the pouring rain, Sagan drives an extractor syringe straight into the fallen creature's skull. As he pumps the dark fluid, he marvels at its raw potency. The blood of a true vampire lineage feels entirely different from the cheap thugs he usually hunts. Feeling the potent lineage blood surge inside his extractor, Sagan finally understands why that younger mobster was such an absolute physical powerhouse. Pest control isn't over yet. He tightens his grip on his katana, marching straight toward their primary objective, a quiet building whose steps are already painted with the blood of slaughtered guards. Flashbacks of torn bodies and desperate survival flood his mind. He refuses to be a helpless victim ever again. Knowing basic firepower won't cut it against the horrors waiting inside, the green-haired fighter pops a glowing stimulant capsule onto his tongue. It is finally time to unleash the mind-bending chaos of psychedelic moon. A massive, violent shockwave of hallucinogenic colors warps the flooded street. The dual-wielder's eyes ignite with a piercing, unnatural blue light that cuts right through the storm. He levels his steel and sidearm, silently vowing that he is no longer the weak prey he used to be. The sheer sensory overload of the drug brings a physical tear to his eye, but I love watching a true professional push through the agonizing rush. His boots splash through rain puddles that now reflect a twisted neon reality. He breaks into a dead sprint. Sagan breaches the front doors, stepping effortlessly over the ruined bodies of the perimeter defense. His hyper-aware gaze sweeps the grim interior, locking onto the next monstrous threat waiting in the shadows. Will his new powers be enough to survive what comes next? Inside the ruined apartment, the gruesome aftermath hits our young protagonist incredibly hard. Segan stares blankly at the lifeless victim sprawled across the bloody mattress, trembling as he quietly admits he truly hoped this person would survive the slaughter. The brutal reality of this hidden war takes no prisoners. Unfortunately, mourning won't stop the nightmare. Dropping his useless katana, the grieving hunter smoothly chambers a fresh round into his heavy sidearm. He steps up right behind the dark-haired survivor, mercilessly pressing the cold steel muzzle directly against the back of her skull. Some infections just can't be cured. Tears stream down his unnaturally glowing face as he recites a grim final prayer. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. The corrupted girl doesn't even flinch. She just smiles peacefully right before Segan pulls the trigger, ending her misery and painting the dark room in a tragic spray of crimson. Down in the flooded alleyways, the surviving bloodsucker clutches his ruined chest, cursing his miserable luck. He really shouldn't have stopped to catch his breath. Standing in the freezing rain, the silver-haired hunter raises his blade. Without a word, he unleashes a blinding grid of holy light, dicing the wounded monster into a dozen neat, smoking pieces. Jungjun steps out of the shadows, groaning like a tired mechanic at the pile of blue ash. The scarred cleaner reminds his partner that turning targets into confetti makes harvesting vampire blood utterly impossible. The rogue priest dismisses the complaint entirely. He orders the veteran mercenary to fetch the grieving kid immediately, warning that too many unseen eyes are starting to gather in the dark. That ominous warning wipes the casual annoyance right off the cleaner's face. He nervously asks if there's a threat even worse than the phantoms lurking tonight. The mere mention of the name T-Tranex hangs in the frigid air like an absolute death sentence. The executioner offers zero comfort, leaving his contractor standing alone under the flashing lightning. Across town, the breached apartment is now a raging, untamable inferno. The veteran cleaner slams on his brakes just in time to witness the aftermath of the boy's tragic execution. Han Segan strides straight out of the roaring flames, absolutely drenched in gore, gripping a paper shopping bag that leaks fresh crimson onto the flooded pavement. What do you even say to a kid who just executed his only lead? His soul looks completely hollowed out. The green-haired hunter stares ahead with dead, glowing eyes and simply asks for a ride away from the slaughterhouse. By the time sirens cut through the storm and firefighters rush the blazing complex, the true monsters of the night have already vanished. Far above the chaos, the rogue priest surveys the burning cityscape from a quiet rooftop. Honestly, his intel-gathering methods are as strange as his sword techniques. Surrounded by a small army of stray cats and street pigeons, the holy executioner demands they empty their mouths. On command, a street tabby casually coughs up a mouthful of spent brass casings, delivering the exact evidence he needs. With the city in ruins and the pieces finally falling into place, the trail of carnage points toward a fresh location. Outside the upscale Arjuna Club, a sleek sports car sits parked under the dim lamps. The night's bloodshed is far from over, except now, vengeance is pulling right up to the front door. The sleek red sports car pulls up to the upscale Arjuna Club, but the real danger is already waiting inside. The silver-haired hunter sits directly across from a man who radiates absolute authority. This blonde aristocrat scoffs at the Inquisitor's recklessness for barging in, claiming he just wants a quiet chat. But the executioner isn't here for small talk. He demands to know why this elusive demon has finally shown his face. The elegant bloodsucker smirks, dodging the question with theatrical flair. He asks for a moment of patience, boasting about their infinite lifespans. But the rogue priest immediately shuts him down. He coldly declares that the so-called infinity of a rat who survives by stealing human time isn't worth a second of his attention. Honestly, sitting down for coffee with a monster you usually dice into cubes takes some serious self-control. The executioner's eyes flare a menacing blue as he demands the monster's true purpose. Taking a slow, calculated sip of his drink, the blonde aristocrat drops the act. He warns the rogue inquisitor, now addressing him by the name Sylvester, not to try so hard to fall out of Tetranex's favor. A vampire expressing concern for a hunter? That's about as trustworthy as a viper offering a handshake. The elegant demon clarifies it isn't concern, but a direct warning. Sylvester just grins like a shark smelling blood in the water. He asks what happens if he simply refuses to behave, daring the creature to make a move. In response, a heavy pistol is slammed onto the table between them. If they want to settle this with a trial of strength, the veteran hunter is more than happy to start the bloodshed right here and now. The tension in the cafe is thick enough to snap a blade. The blonde monster's eye ignites with a terrifying purple glow as he shifts the dynamic. He condescendingly reminds Sylvester that the days of mindless savagery are over, and brawling like animals would ruin his refined aesthetic. Staring down the Inquisitor, he makes an absolute, chilling declaration. He claims the ultimate title, king of both vampires and humans. The heavy gun rests between them like a ticking bomb. the self-proclaimed monarch announces that today is a very special occasion. He plans to present the ultimate gift of revenge to the child who recently became the youngest of their cursed bloodline. As the elegant demon stands up, it's clear this isn't a negotiation anymore, it's a promise of war. The self-proclaimed monarch delivers his final, chilling warning. He advises the rogue inquisitor not to push his luck, casually grabbing his coat. Having dropped his absolute declaration of war, the elegant demon strolls out the front door. Left alone at the table, Sylvester's eyes flare with barely contained killing intent. He sarcastically thanks the monster for the coffee. Back out in the freezing downpour, the silver-haired executioner regroups with his battered associates. He inspects the spent shell casing he procured earlier, coldly scolding his newest operative. What good is a bloody raid if they leave a trail of evidence behind? Han Sigun trudges up to a park bench and collapses. Still gripping that crimson-stained shopping bag, the veteran priest mercilessly notes that the kid clearly failed to target height. Staring at the flooded pavement, the hollowed-out boy quietly mutters the Inquisitor's name. Then, his mind simply cracks. Sagan throws his head back and lets out a jagged, hysterical laugh. He asks if he looks like Kurt Cobain. It's a pitch-black punchline from a completely shattered soul. The rogue priest dismisses the dark humor entirely, claiming the kid is just delirious from the blood loss. But the frantic laughter quickly dies. The green-haired hunter buries his face in his hands, completely consumed by grief. The three men stand in dead silence at the overlook. Below them, the fiery glow of the breached apartment complex still rages against the stormy horizon. But Tetranex's promised vengeance is already taking shape in the shadows. Somewhere else in the sprawling city, a terrified civilian scrambles backward across the wet pavement. A massive, bone-plated demon rears its terrifying skull-like face into the freezing rain, letting out a deafening roar. The Vampire King has made his move. Now, the real slaughter begins. On the neon-lit streets, three local thugs kill time outside a clothes shop, bitterly griping about their cheapskate boss. I mean, we've all had bosses we wanted to strangle, right? Too bad their mundane routine violently shatters when a sickening wet crunch echoes from the pitch-black alley next door. Their annoyance instantly morphs into dread. Peering bravely into the suffocating gloom, the punks spot a massive, hunched silhouette squatting among the garbage bags. At first, the lead street rat mistakes the hulking shape for an oversized vagrant rummaging for discarded scraps. A fatal miscalculation. Ordinary beggars don't casually tear ragged chunks of meat off a fresh human skull. Blind panic flares as the thugs furiously weigh their options, foolishly wondering if three tough street brawlers can take this freak in a fight. Their pathetic bravado completely evaporates the very second a trembling flashlight beam hits the creature's grotesque face. Two glowing crimson eyes lock onto the intruders. The hunt is on. Before anyone can even scream for help, the monstrosity lunges forward, obliterating the lead punk in a blinding, explosive spray of gore. The two surviving street rats stand completely paralyzed in absolute terror. Looming over them, the beast's skeletal maw drips with fresh viscera. Is this waking nightmare actually getting bigger by the second? See, this towering abomination wasn't always a mindless slaughter machine roaming the pitch-black night. Deep inside that twisted husk, it vaguely remembers being a totally normal human. That fragile, precious piece lasted right up until an agonizing, inexplicable thirst violently hijacked its entire body. The ravenous hunger clawed at its throat like jagged glass, ruthlessly shredding its sanity and erasing every trace of its former identity. When the helpless victim finally opened its bloodshot eyes again, the human was entirely, irrevocably dead. Only a ravenous demon remained. Despite devouring an impossible amount of flesh, the phantom starvation only burns hotter inside this twisted mutation. As the beast prowls toward a quiet city park, a sickening realization echoes in its shattered mind. Is human meat really this delicious? A late-night jogger huffs through his routine, blissfully unaware he's just wandered onto an active hunting ground. Suddenly, a shattered skull violently impacts the pavement right beside his sneakers. He scrambles back in shock, but before he can even process the horror, the reflection in his spectacles spells certain doom. The skeletal abomination drops out of the pitch-black sky like a nightmare made real. The terrified civilian frantically backpedals across the concrete. I mean, what else can you do? But there's zero chance of outrunning a predator that defies physics. The beast lunges forward, closing the distance in a terrifying, explosive dash. It obliterates its prey in a blinding shower of crimson. But the midnight feast is suddenly interrupted by a fatal misstep. A panicked resident in an overlooking apartment snaps a photo. That bright camera flash violently pierces the darkness. Instantly, the demon's glowing eyes snap toward the window. You just signed your own death warrant, buddy. That single flash triggers an absolute massacre. The quiet park instantly transforms into a sprawling slaughterhouse as the fiend shreds through the remaining bystanders in a merciless blur of claws and viscera. Snapping spines and crushing skulls, the abomination roars into the night, completely consumed by an endless, maddening demand for more victims. The next day, the morning sun offers zero comfort to the city's hidden underworld. Out at a remote, dusty warehouse, the scarred mercenary Jung Jun finally surfaces to meet his shady associate. The elderly blood dealer, Ju, wastes zero time complaining about their empty shelves. He's clearly annoyed that the veteran cleaner has been entirely off the grid while their business bleeds cash. Jung Jun just stares back in heavy, stoic silence. He already knows exactly what kind of hell has just been unleashed on the streets. Back at the dusty warehouse, Jung Jun finally hands over a heavy duffel bag of fresh supplies to his irritated dealer, Ju. The scarred mercenary expects a quick payout. Instead, their shady transaction is abruptly interrupted when a small television hums to life in the corner. The local news anchor immediately launches into a frantic breaking report about the horrific overnight park massacre. Panicked eyewitnesses flood the local news broadcasts, entirely rejecting the police department's desperate attempt to spin the bloodbath as a mundane, drunken rampage. They know exactly what they saw. Blurry cell phone footage hits the screen next, capturing a hulking, demonic entity literally tearing a screaming civilian in half. You really think regular cops can handle a threat like that? Jung Jun glares at the pixelated carnage on the screen, instantly recognizing the chilling signs of a corrupted mutation. See, there has always been one golden, unspoken rule between the veteran hunters and the blood-sucking mob: keep their violent, supernatural war strictly in the shadows. Ordinary people were never supposed to know. But this reckless monster just blew that fragile treaty wide open. Adjusting his tinted glasses, the elderly dealer grimly warns that independent vampires will inevitably crawl out of the woodwork to handle the exposure themselves, and a greedy swarm of rogue hunters will follow right behind them, eager to cash in on the mounting chaos. The veteran cleaner scowls at the bleak forecast. The city streets are about to drown in blood all over again. Later that evening, flickering police tape cordons off the grisly crime scene at the quiet park. The authorities foolishly think they have the situation locked down and contained. Except their mundane investigations are totally useless now. Ordinary yellow plastic isn't exactly going to stop the absolute nightmare currently lurking just out of sight. Deep in an empty alleyway, the abomination continues its grotesque feast by some vending machines. It thinks it's the absolute apex predator of the night. That delusion abruptly shatters when a blinding strike violently impales its mutated flesh. A brutal kinetic punch sends the beast skidding across the concrete. Enraged, the demon whips around to face its attacker, only to find two sharply dressed figures casually strolling out of the shadows. Glowing red eyes pierce the gloom. The local vampires are awake, and they're seriously annoyed this mindless freak is ruining their peace and quiet. And that's where the story is currently at. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed the recap, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe because I'll be posting new chapters as soon as they come out. See you in the next one.